Seeing the presence of a quorum, I will now call the Amherst Pelham Regional School Committee to order at 6:30 on January 10th, 2023. Actually, so we'll take a roll call. Sarah Bess,
Sarah Bess present.
Peter,
Peter.
Margaret present.
Jennifer,
Present.
Allison,
Present.
Irv
present.
Craig
Present.
and Ben present. I'll turn it over to the Amherst chair.
Seeing a presence of a quorum of the Amherst School Committee, I'm calling to order that meeting at 6:31 p.m. on Tuesday, January 10th. And we'll begin. We have to take a roll call attendance. So when I call your name, please say present. Peter.
Present. Peter.
Jennifer.
Present.
Irv.
Present.
Ben present.
And Allison present. And I'll turn it back over to the regional chair to run the joint portion of the meeting.
All right, thank you. We will approve minutes from November 17th. Did everybody have a chance to look the minutes over from that last joint meeting? I see some head nods. I see a head shake. I see a thumbs up. I see another head nod. Did anyone have any edits, additions, or anything else? I guess just edits or additions, right? It's looking like no, so I will entertain a motion if anyone has one. Or I'll just move to approve the minutes from November 17th, 2022.
Second.
Moved by me, seconded by Margaret. No discussion necessary, so I will take a roll call vote. Sarah Bess?
Sarah Bess, aye.
I was going to say affirming head nod. All right. Peter?
Peter, aye.
Margaret?
Margaret, aye.
Jennifer?
Aye.
Allison?
Allison, aye.
Irv?
Aye.
Craig?
Craig, aye.
And Ben, aye. Are there 7 of us? 1, 2, 3, 4. Who did I miss? I feel like I missed someone. It keeps moving around on me here. Did I get Craig? I got Craig. All right, we'll say that passes. And
I believe that the Amherst School Committee's already approved these minutes, but I could be wrong.
Yep.
Does Maylene, do you have a record of that?
I think you are right, but I'd have to go back and check. But I do know these set of minutes were previously approved by a committee, so probably Amherst.
Okay, thank you.
fair enough. So we will move on to the sixth grade bathrooms discussion. Mike, did you want to set that up?
I think there's a public comment for the joint portion before we go there.
Right. Is anyone able to play that? Yep. Thank you, Allison.
I just wonder, since the speaker is present in the room, if they would prefer to speak out loud, or I can pull it up and we can play the recording.
Hello, my name is Claire Poco.
Sorry, let me. Okay.
Hello, my name is Claire Coco. I live in Amherst and I teach at the middle school. I am reading a statement for joint Amherst and regional public comment. I'm leaving it on January 10th, Tuesday, and it's signed by 14 staff from ARMS. At the middle school, we are eager to welcome all the new students, staff, and families to the building next year, 6th and 7th grades. Our unofficial motto is, we welcome you with open arms. While the regional school agreement limits our ability to be one unified school, and we really hope that will change, we recognize that in many practical day-to-day situations, we will be together. 2/3 of our building is full of new 6th and 7th grade students. Our 11 through 14-year-olds will take the buses together and share spaces like the library and hallways. A few students will be in shared program rooms or classes. Although the 6th graders will, for the most part, have their own teachers, classrooms, and schedule, they will be here in the same building with the 7th and 8th graders. We know that there are concerns about one of those shared spaces, the bathrooms. We are grateful that the school committees are taking the time to consider bathroom safety, and our hope is that you will consider it a middle school issue, not just a 6th grade issue. All students, 6th, 7th, and 8th, deserve safe, unrestricted access to the bathrooms. It's important to note that since the days of the 7th through 9th grade Amherst Junior High, the middle school has lost access to both student and staff bathrooms because former classroom space is now facility space and LSSE space. Now, if the 6th graders had exclusive access to bathrooms in a segregated area, that would mean about 38% of the student body would have access to one girls' and one boys' multi-stall bathroom and one all-gender single stall. This leaves the 7th and 8th graders, 62% of the student body, with access to one all-gender single stall bathroom and 2 multi-stalls each for boys and girls. 2, but one of those multi-stall options would be on a different floor from where most of the classrooms are, requiring our 8th graders, who would adjoin the 6th grade area, to leave class for longer when often a bathroom would be right around the corner. We've made a lot of progress since last year on improving undesired student behaviors, but we know we have some more work to do too. And students themselves have asked us to upgrade our bathroom facilities, and we need to make sure that staff has access to bathrooms as well. So we're looking for your support for the following: affirming that we are an integrated, not segregated middle school in which any student can use any bathroom that aligns with their gender expression. Empowering ARMS to develop a leadership program for rising 8th graders with the goal of encouraging a culture of acceptance and respect for people and property. Explore funding for upgrades to our facilities, particularly the bathrooms, and an improved monitoring system in halls and outside the bathrooms. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Allison, for sharing that. And now we'll move on to the 6th grade bathroom conversation. Mike?
I'm sorry to do this again, but I didn't know if there was any other members of the public who might want to give a live comment. I didn't see any hands go up, but just figured we'd ask, and then I'm happy to run in and jump into it if there's no hands that go up.
I was going to say, a couple weeks off, I'm already rusty at this.
Happy New Year, right?
Right. So yeah, if anybody who is present wishes to speak, you can just go ahead and raise your hand at the bottom and we'll acknowledge you. Going once, going twice, and now bathrooms.
Okay, sounds good. So thank you. And there's a kind of summary report. There's a lot of attachments, I know, tonight, but let me see if I can pull that up. There we go. So I want to frame the conversation by saying I would not recommend taking a vote tonight or anything. I think this is really for me to share information, for you all to ask questions, as a couple of you have done, to come in and maybe walk the hallways and get a sense of what this looks like and gather more feedback from constituents. I appreciate Claire sharing her statement tonight, and definitely heard from a number of families as well as middle school staff members. So sort of the 3 options that we had as possible configurations. The first one, the first just describes where the cluster of student bathrooms are currently in the building. One's in the eastern hallway, the 2nd floor, one's in the western hallway. Both of them have full-size boys and girls bathrooms, as well as an all-gender bathroom, like more of a single stall bathroom. And then there's a cluster of bathrooms downstairs on the 1st floor that often right now get used during lunch and art and some other classes that occur on the 1st floor. There's also a set of adult bathrooms that are adjacent to the cafeteria, but a little more public in terms of their area closer to the office, that may end up getting considered. So, there's sort of three options. The first option is similar to what, Ms. Coco shared earlier, is that, oh, excuse me. Let me actually start with option C. So the second floor bathrooms in the sixth grade would be also used by the eighth graders. There'd be a bathroom monitor on the hallway, but no other restrictions or controls. So that was, you heard advocacy for that. I do want to kind of share and note that the bathrooms are in the sixth grade hallway. Allison, are you raising your hand? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. And that's, what we've seen visiting other 6 through 8 middle schools. That's what's most typical, is that the bathroom use is not particularly restricted. I think where bathrooms are located and what classrooms are near it are done intentionally and thoughtfully, but not that there are specific bathrooms for specific students in specific grade levels. I also think it's worth noting that there is a single stall bathroom for sixth grade students who go to the bathroom who may not want to be in a larger space. There is, it could be used, but it's often not. It's often available, and so there is that option for sixth grade students there. And I think, the perspective I'm hearing, and Claire talked about it, but from staff members, is philosophically there's one building, and that older students often might be helpful. You think of, students going through puberty, and there's been some reports of students who have been part of this conversation recently who kind of reference that cross grade or cross age relationship has been helpful as bodily changes are occurring. I'll scroll up now to option A, which is that second floor bathrooms in the sixth grade wing would not be used by eighth graders. And the eighth grade students would go downstairs to use the full set of bathrooms in the first floor. And that's sort of option A. And option B is that we would flip the adult and student bathrooms in the first floor. The idea is that the adult bathrooms, if you go right down the hallway from many of the eighth grade classrooms next year, it's not that far, and it keeps it a much more public space. And, I know it sounds awkward perhaps, but bathrooms being less in a back hallway, more in a public space in terms of safety is thought of that might be an interesting solution to this. I think, the last thing we noted on the memo was, we made a decision tree that adding bathrooms, our facilities folks have said it's not particularly feasible, but reorganizing bathrooms may be, so creating more inviting spaces and maybe, shifting where stalls are, where walls are, where doors are. Those are things that are more in our control. Sort of adding bathrooms is not particularly in our control because of all the infrastructure work that would be required in terms of putting water in spaces that don't have water, all those kind of pieces. So, these were 3 options we came up with. At this point, we're not at a recommendation place. I think it's worth noting in the feedback that we received from the staff in the community, the question was, how important is it that there's bathrooms in the sixth grade wing, not that the sixth grade students have exclusive use of those bathrooms. That was not a question we've asked to date. We don't know the answer to how people would feel about that, but the wording would not, it's unknown how strong people feel about exclusive use. What was clear is that people felt really strongly that the sixth grade wing should have bathrooms in it. And so I'm, just presenting these as the 3 options that we came up with. We're happy to answer feedback or receive feedback or answer questions from the committee. And then, if the committee would like us to kind of gather more feedback from staff, families, students, and the larger community, we certainly could, but I would not recommend taking an action tonight more than having a discussion and asking questions, having some conversation. So I think I'm trying to be brief because I know it's a long set of agendas and a multiple joint and Amherst meetings. So I think I'll pause there. I can certainly bring up a map if that's helpful, but this is all on the packet and the maps are linked from there. So happy to stop talking and see if there's questions or comments anyone on the committee might have.
Allison, go ahead.
I guess I have a question about some of the things that the public commenters had raised, and it's interesting because as I approach this, we framed this as a bathroom access question, when I wonder if the question is really a bathroom safety question, because it's something, having had kids that are more recently in the middle school and the high school and not sort of in sixth grade in the elementary school, it, it's an issue that's not new, that, even seventh and eighth graders have challenges or issues or concerns about using the bathrooms in the middle school for just comfort, like safety comfort, not sort of is it warm and you know not in climate comfort, but and and so I just wonder, what are some of the, I mean, you mentioned that we can't build more bathrooms, and that's understood, but what are some of the things that we've explored to enhance safety in the hallways and the bathrooms for all students, current, whether sixth grade is there or not? Because part of me wonders is like we might solve the wrong problem, with deciding on an exclusivity for sixth grade.
Right. Yep. No, I solved that. Sorry about that. I'm rusty as well. So I appreciate that, and am quite moved by the same kind of thinking that it's the wrong problem perhaps to be solving. I think the situation in my experience this year has improved with a couple things. One is some reorganization of the deans and dean team at the middle school, and the high school for that matter. I think the second piece has been more active monitoring of hall passes and more, it sounds a little awkward, but just making sure that students are where they need to be with a little more accuracy and attention that's been placed on that. It's not that no one cared before, but I think it's been school wide. The staff have done a phenomenal job of increasing our work with that. As it relates to bathrooms, I mean, what's not, one thing that's been successful is we have taken off the doors on two of the bathrooms downstairs, and there's still privacy because of the orientation of the bathroom. Think of like airport bathrooms, that kind of model, which if we're building a new school is actually the norm in new building projects, and we can explore that a little further. I do think, the size of the bathrooms and the amount of space in it is probably not ideal. There's too much room to congregate in my experience. Did more time after school and before school in middle school bathrooms than I have since I was in middle school in the last couple of weeks. And if you want to hang, that's a good place to hang, right? There's a lot of space, and it also looks very institutional in there. There's not, I think it does matter how people view the space in terms of the aesthetics of it. And so I do think there's places to go with that. I know at the high school, as I think many of you are aware, we've started looking and started installing a couple places vape sensors, not in a gotcha kind of way, but just so that deterrent. And you'll hear more about that at the next regional school committee meeting, about how that's going and how that's working. So I don't want to delve too much in without Principal Sadiq here. So I do think there's lots of strategies in addition to what has already happened that we could employ around this. But I tend to feel similar to what you're describing, that I think if we approach the problem as how do we improve the environment and culture around, less structured spaces, bathrooms being less structured, that would be an approach that, for me, I'd be very comfortable and eager to dig into. And I think the middle school staff would be, I don't want to speak for them, but based on what I'm hearing directly from some leaders at the middle school staff, they also would be happy to continue to dig deeper into that as well. And I think they'll come up with a lot of great ideas with it. So, long story short, I really appreciate and agree with that perspective. And I think there's a lot of work that can be done, has been done, that has improved the situation and can continue to be done.
Sarah Bess?
Thanks. Okay, so I have the plans up over here. So if I look like I'm not paying attention, it's because I'm trying to look at the plans. All right, so if you look at, I'm looking at both floors, but on the second floor where the sixth grade hallway is, there's a blue line that indicates a proposed door on that right there, near to where the bathrooms are located. So I guess what is the intention of the door? Is it like locked, always closed, nobody passes through? Is it just like a, hey, we're trying to have some quieter space over here? Is it like, because the sixth graders will not be on the same schedule as the seventh and eighth graders, correct? So they'll be passing at different times. Okay. So I feel like I agree with what Allison has said. Like maybe we need to look at this as a more holistic approach. And I think sending kids to bathrooms that are not the closest to wherever their classroom is. So like if you are an eighth grader in this corner over here, and now you have to like, or you're not allowed to use the other bathrooms and you're going like all over the school, I feel like that has potential to maybe lead to some ill-used time. So I think I like the idea of like looking at it as a more holistic approach for all children, all students to have, more access. And I think especially the single stalls are important to make sure that there's enough for kids to feel comfortable using them, rather than, being in a big space or being, far away from wherever their classrooms are.
Yep. So that door is not intended to be locked, to be clear. And again, I think a couple of you have come. I encourage you to walk up with, myself. Certainly you can, Principal Sharon. It's really intended to be, as you said, to, be a quieter reminder of space and reduce some of the traffic pieces and noise so that it does distinguish things at the other end. We see like room C16.
Yeah.
So the two rooms adjacent to that would be a specialized program that are grade 6 through 8. So there's a natural, and there's a door out there. So
In that
on that
corner.
end, there sort of is a distinct end of the hallway where sixth grade starts, and there isn't on the half hallway. So the idea of the door is to provide that, and it, it's not that it's going to stay shut or locked. It's actually egress wise, we wouldn't do that anyway. It provides more of a difference than I would have thought, having walked it and seen it. And so it's really a soft separation, not a hard separation, to provide that. But it wouldn't be something that if the bathrooms were open, that would be a barrier to getting there. It's a double door that you open the door. It's not a, yeah, exactly.
Perfect. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah Beth.
Jennifer, go ahead.
So I'm aware that the district has communicated with families in writing that the sixth grade would have their own bathrooms. One example is an FAQ that was sent out in October that said sixth grade would have their own hallway and their own bathrooms. So I think that, and I think that my impression is that that is one of the things that has set families' minds at ease a little bit about this change. But hear what Ms. Coco said about the idea of thinking of the school as thinking of the school and the students holistically. But at the same time, like we did say that sixth grade would have their own one bathroom. So I feel like in this first transition year, we should, absent a super compelling reason to not give sixth grade their own bathroom, I think we should stick to what we said and to what it seems like people are comfortable with. And then we can learn from the first year and use those learnings to make changes and improvements in future years. But I still would be in favor of an option that allows sixth graders to have their own bathroom.
Peter, go ahead.
So I appreciate the way it's being presented tonight. I'm glad we don't have to vote on it right now. I guess generally speaking, I agree with the sentiment that some have expressed that if we can avoid bathroom exclusivity for a grade, then that's preferred. If we can do that while meeting the needs of all students and servicing their academic needs and their social emotional needs and keeping everybody safe. Because I'm just thinking about the implementation logistics of policing such an exclusivity, and it's not like kids walk around with their grade on their sweater, right? And kids have, a fair degree of movement freedom within the building. They're not, there's not a teacher tracking them between classes, as they're moving around. And so how do you actually, and enforce that? And I think it also it does raise the question that I think Allison um, phrased, which is, underneath this is more about safety than access, and the concern, right? If you're a parent of a fifth grader or younger, and you have, an elementary school kid, and you think of them going into the world of adolescence and all that entails, and now they're going into this crazy new experience, you want them protected. I mean, that's it's very natural. And, having had 3 kids go from elementary onwards, I'm very familiar with that feeling. I'm sure many of us are. And so on the one hand, there is some sense to, wanting to have some separation of service between younger children and older children. However, when I sort of fall back to, we're talking about 6th graders versus 7th and 8th graders. So 1 or 2 grades difference, not 2nd graders and 8th graders or 7th graders. And so they're closer in development than maybe we think when we think of average elementary student. And also in terms of, safety, if the concern is not wanting to expose one's child to other students who are making bad choices, I mean, that would be a concern of a 7th grade parent, not wanting their 7th grader to be exposed to other 7th graders who are making bad choices, right? I mean, that's why we've upped the attention, as you were mentioning about the hallway monitoring, and why these other options for potentially exploring configuration and layout of bathrooms is on the docket, and why we've done some things at the high school. So if I put myself in the mindset of a 7th and an 8th grade parent saying, well, I had the same concerns, and it's I think it would be a little too simplistic to say, well, the 6th graders will have their own bathroom, therefore don't worry about any interaction with anyone who's making wrong choices at the middle school. That's just, it's not a realistic promise to make. And I mean, as in terms of what we've already communicated, I mean, we specifically didn't vote the bathroom configuration because we wanted more time to explore it and get more feedback, like we're doing right now. So, and there have been other aspects of this plan that have changed over time in response to feedback when we said this is the current plan, and then we changed course. And so I think that's how the process runs. So I don't feel it's not correct to make a different choice than what was initially drafted. I guess, longer term, in terms of being able to make a final decision, what I would like to know, at that time would be, what exactly are we talking about when you say configuration and layout of bathroom? You sort of alluded to the airport layout, and that's interesting. But what other opportunities do we have, and what is the general price tag? Are we talking, less than 100,000? Are we talking less than $1 million? Like what's the cost and what's the benefit, right, for that kind of implementation? And for hallway monitoring, it's we don't want to just sort of wave our hand and say, well, there'll be monitors, so don't worry about it, right? We want to have a particular protocol and an action plan in place for, here's the layout of the hallways, and here's the bathroom, and this is what the staffing levels, and this is why we're going to have it, and we're documenting it so it's not just attended to in the first year and forgotten about in later years. So I think those implementation logistics are really important in order to be able to make a final decision. That's how I feel right now.
Thank you. Jaden, go ahead.
I just think something we might want to take into consideration is, first of all, I see both sides. I see the parent side, I see the concerns raised, but something that might want to be thought about is if adding new bathrooms is not a possibility, that means that the existing bathrooms might become more crowded for 7th and 8th graders, which, if safety is concern and comfort is a concern, then a crowded bathroom is not really good for anyone, especially during passing periods, during lunch. At the high school, they've kind of had issues monitoring. So like sometimes the bathrooms have to be locked on one floor, which means that the other bathrooms are crowded. It's inconvenient for everyone. It's not like a super, like Allison said, comfortable environment for everyone. So that's something definitely to consider. And, if the 6th graders are being sort of isolated in their first year at the middle school, it's a big jump to 7th grade to be going into these kind of, you know, more chaotic, crowded restrooms. And also just what Sarah Bess was mentioning earlier about bathrooms being less convenient to access if they're not near your class, you know, that's definitely something to think about because, again, I've experienced that at the high school, certain bathrooms being locked. It takes a lot of class time away. You don't want to be going for 10-minute bathroom breaks, especially with the class period times that we have. So those are just some things to think about.
Yeah, I was gonna say I probably exist in that like middle ground as well, especially like experiencing the middle school, right? Like I'm kind of okay with the idea of there being a 6th grade bathroom, a 7th grade bathroom, and an 8th grade bathroom. I also understand like the practicality of like if you're in the cafeteria, sending someone upstairs to the 6th grade bathroom to use the bathroom is completely impractical. So using the bathroom closest to where you are at any given moment, kind of like it works now, right? Like there's a 7th grade bathroom. There might be times where an 8th grader uses that bathroom because that's the most convenient bathroom, right? Like I don't know that I have concerns that I don't number one, I don't like the idea of like segregating different kids off to different sections, right? Like this is your bathroom because you're in 6th grade and that's the only one you can use in the building. But and I also at the same time I kind of get the discomfort of like this is new to us here, right? It's not new to folks throughout the country, and I think there are models where like I'm thinking like JFK. I was just in JFK last Friday, and it doesn't appear that they have segregated bathrooms. You know, so I think it can work. I just think we have to get through the comfort part, and I also don't think we need to rush a decision right now either. That's my 2 cents there. And that's all I have to say about it right now. Does anyone else have anything to say? There we go. Mike, go ahead.
So as a next step, this is really helpful feedback. Would it be all right if I came back to the region on the 31st? Whether we do a joint meeting or something, I think that gives me and my team enough time to figure out, you know, how to engage folks on this question, because I do think the range of opinions we might receive is really valuable, just like there's been a range of opinions in this group. And so if I know we're sort of like future agenda items, but that's not on the region part, but if the chairs would be comfortable, you know, that seems like a reasonable amount of time for myself and my team to sort of organize ourselves of what that engagement would look like and have a discussion about that here if that's agreeable to the committees. Okay. Thank you.
All right. So if no one else has anything to add, we will move on to security video access protocols. Mike.
So this was a request, just to go backwards before we go forwards to provide context. This was a request from the Amherst School Committee, partially because there's an Amherst building project and there was a discussion about security cameras at the Amherst elementary school level. We then realized 2 things. One is that 6th graders could be in our middle school next year. And so we do have cameras in our middle school and they would be Amherst elementary school students. So that was a good reason to talk about it as a joint way. It also is the case that this current protocol was developed before I was in this role. So I'll bring it up in a second, but I believe it's 2015 or 16. And the committee hasn't looked at it in a while. Probably, I'm trying to think of when Steve's not here tonight, I don't think, but when he was on the committee. So, you know, it may be the case that no current committee members were part of the development. There was a lot of discussion at that point in time. In my old role, I was there for a lot of that discussion. So I figured I'd bring it up. I could talk through how it works currently and see if there's any questions or suggestions. But let me bring up the protocol. And maybe I'll just talk through some of the major points, if that's okay with the committee, to orient folks. That we only put cameras in places, hallways, athletic areas, large gathering areas. They're not in classroom settings. They're certainly not in bathrooms or any place that has a privacy piece aspect of that. You know, the only exception in terms of the use of cameras is if there's a criminal violation or something like that, you know, but we really look at this as school related discipline, not as police related discipline. We keep that line very, very thick with very few, you know, extenuating circumstances when it relates to like felony type behaviors. For signs and notification, there's signs in the public entryways, and it's in our handbooks around the notifications. I think the big thing to note, because I think this is something that I've gotten intermittently questions about over the years, is, okay, how does approval happen? So we have cameras. How do we do it? No one is watching the cameras throughout the day. This is not like the movies where there's a surveillance camera and there's a security guard and they're spending all day watching it. That is not our scenario. We don't have that. That's not how our system works. The way it works is if there is an incident or if there's a concern expressed by usually either, to me, it usually comes through a dean or assistant principal or principal. Sometimes it might come from a staff member to those individuals. They reach out to me. And the only time there's a designee is if I'm not out that day, and then it would be Doreen. And they asked to review the surveillance recordings, so they're asking to look at the video. And until I give the okay, the people involved in the video who have access to the video, which is generally Jerry Champagne, our IS director, do not let anyone look at the video. So there's a pretty tight lock on those. And for me to approve the use of the video, I need to know what happened, why someone needs the video, what's the reported situation that occurs. So we're really not looking at it all the time, far from it. It's much less frequent than people might believe. And really what we're trying to do is we often, in many conflicts in the world, as well as in our schools, we end up in a they said situation where there's a conflict. We have competing information about what actually happened. And for me, what has been really helpful is when we do have video that captures a situation, we're able to actively look at it and understand what happened and then try to resolve challenges with more information than we have than disagreeing opinions. And so I found it's been really helpful. It's often where people say, that kid did that, like Mike Morris did that thing. And we look at the video and say, no, Mike Morris did not do that thing. We know that student did not do that thing. And that happens much more frequently than people believe. So it's, it's really not a gotcha thing. It's actually just literally trying to figure out what happened, understand who was involved and what happened with it. And we also have it on some buses, and very similar situation, though that happens even less frequently than, frankly, it gets used in schools. If we do have it, it can be used in disciplinary investigations. And again, with rare exceptions, we're talking about law enforcement, but there have been situations where, there's misdemeanor, felony kind of behavior. And that is important for us to know about to maintain school safety. Our video recordings are maintained for a maximum of 30 days. They're on a loop and then deleted. And really that's how the system works. I think if our principals are here, you'll be able to talk to, for the region folks, you'll be able to talk to Principal Sadiq about it next week at the region meeting. I think our principals would tell you that they find it really helpful. It's helpful in multiple reasons. One, as I described, it helps us understand what actually happened when there are conflicts. It also can help us understand better precipitating factors. It's also, something that kind of gets away from some of the blame places that can go without evidence or information. So, we found it to be helpful. It's the days of just saying, we still do all the piece of talking to witnesses, but when we have that additional information, it's helpful. We do not share this video with families or members of the public. We look at these as private pieces. We will often describe what we see in a video to families, but because there's so many, they're all student records and there's always multiple students involved, we do not open the videos up for families. That's been a point of sometimes hard moments for families where they want to have access to the video to understand exactly what happened. And because there's multiple students in just about every video in these kind of scenarios, we do not share video with families. We can often say, well, I saw Mike doing this right in the video, but we don't directly share the video with members of the public or with families directly. But for us, it's been invaluable. We've had a couple high profile in the newspaper kind of situations this year. And I will say that while we had a lot of anecdotal information, the video information gave us incredibly useful information to help us get to the bottom of some pretty serious situations, one in particularly in the fall at the high school, both in terms of who we believe was involved, but also who did some heroic things, and recognizing students who took actions that kept everyone safe, and both of those are important. So that's the way it works now. Happy to answer any questions. Again, receive any feedback. You see it was last revised January 6, 2015, so on Three Kings Day, a long time ago. And so certainly I'm not open to, I'm certainly open to any, critique or feedback or suggestions for how we might improve our systems. But that's sort of the rough summary of the way it works.
Yeah, I just want to jump in. Because there's a question that I've actually had for a while now, just without wearing both hats, but kind of influenced by my day job. I wonder, is it a matter of logistics that we don't have sound inside the buildings, or is there like some deeper reason for that? And I only ask because like sometimes like hearing what has happened kind of adds a bit of context sometimes, because sometimes it's a they said situation, and really all we can key in on is the action. But I was just kind of wondering if you might have an answer for that. And then
my recollection, which is it's been a while since I was part of this conversation. I was doing curriculum instruction at that point, so I wasn't as in the weeds of this one. Was that there was some concern of some committee members about the sound. I don't think it's a technical, like not feasible. Now it may be now because we've purchased the software we've purchased, or the cameras we've purchased, but I think there was some concern about what might be heard and what unrelated types of things might be heard, and student confidentiality that played out. I'm not saying I necessarily share those concerns, but that I believe there were concerns on the part of the committee all the way back when. So, that's something that we could, I could bring back to our IS folks about what's feasible if the committee wanted. But I know that our bus, for instance, as it's noted in here, captures sound, and the bus tends to be a noisy place, right? So, so I think it is technically possible. If the bus can do it, I can't see why the hallways wouldn't be able to do it.
Thank you, Jennifer. Go ahead.
Thanks for sharing this, Mike. It's really helpful to see. I have a bunch of questions and comments about the wording and details, but maybe I can just send those to you separately because I don't think we need to go over all of them. But I have two overarching questions. The first one is about the term surveillance. So in wearing my other hat on the Amherst School Committee, we passed a motion about non-surveillance video. And at the time, my understanding of what that meant was that the cameras are not intended to be monitored in real time. So I thought surveillance meant monitored in real time, and non-surveillance meant not monitored in real time. But this document is called surveillance guidelines, and it has the term surveillance in it. So maybe there's just a change in the way that term is used, but that's something that I think we should clear up. And should I ask my second question, or should
I answer it first? I think I may be, I'll do better one at a time, I think, tonight. So I think the latter thing you said is my understanding as well, that I think in 2015, surveillance perhaps had a different connotation or meaning than it does today, and it does need to be edited in this document because I think it now connotes something that is not actually happening. So, when I was looking, it not funny, but when I was looking at it, I was like, huh, because I was looking for Debbie about, I had a paper copy. I have it right in front of me where I sit. And I was looking, we were trying to figure out what it was called, and security camera viewing protocol. You can see that's the name of the document, but I was like, can you Google or on the email, find out surveillance? She's like, surveillance? Like what, so we had this whole conversation of like, what, because I think it means in 2023, it's a really different term. So that, but we do want to clarify, because right now I think it would cause, or is causing confusion in the committee, and would cause confusion writ large if not clarified.
Great, thank you. I'm glad to hear that we're on the same page about that. My next question is about the very last bullet point on the document is about any law enforcement agency may be provided a duplicate, etc. My question is whether this runs against, we have a policy JII on protection of undocumented students that it looks like was passed in 2017, and this guidelines from 2015. The 2017 policy is about it's about what access ICE can have to school property, and I think it says something like a warrant would be required to allow ICE access to school property, which and this says any law enforcement agency can have a copy of a recording. It doesn't mention a warrant. So like, and the times are different, and these things were passed in different years. So like maybe just another thing that I would suggest we look into as to whether this runs counter to that policy, or what we would how those two interact and how we might want to change the guidelines.
You mind if I respond to that, Ben?
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I think that any law enforcement agency, that phrase probably needs some work. I think in terms of the undocumented or the policy that you mentioned, I can't remember how it's titled. I apologize. That's more about access to the building and less about recorded materials, more about student records pieces. I will say that in practice, I think we're more stringent than this clause indicates. And so this is the one that was bothering me when I was rereading it. I didn't, the surveillance one that you mentioned was it was bothering me, but only in the optics of it, not actually on the practice of it. This one, I think, does need some work, because and I credit the Amherst police for working with us. They know that if they casually ask for video, and it's not something that we believe reaches that threshold of a potential crime, then, we say no, and they're, accept that. And so that's not really indicated on this, but we tend to be quite cagey about those things, except if they compromise the safety of individuals in our school. So that last bulleted point of all these is the one that I think needs the most attention and work, for the reason you mentioned, but actually for broader reasons as well. Because I think, if I'm being quite candid and taking a little risk here, I think we're not totally completely following that. We are more stringent than maybe provided in conjunction with ongoing investigation. We ask lots of questions about what that investigation is, what are the implications for students, what are implications for the schools, and we have a good protocol. Again, that's not a knock on the police department. That's actually just, I think we try to find the right balance of student privacy and safety, and this bulleted point doesn't read that way. So I think it needs a little bit more work.
Peter, go ahead.
So yeah, I mean, I would just agree with what the general point Jennifer's making and what Mike is saying about that last point. So to me, it sort of it hinges on the definition of the word may. So if you read that as can, that's one sense that it's possible that a law enforcement agency could be provided under certain conditions, TBD, versus versus it just at any point, just giving a carte blanche permission. So, I mean, you could say the same thing, but with a much different tone if you said something like, no law enforcement agency will be provided with a duplicate of the recorded materials unless the superintendent determines that blah, 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 blah. And that blah, 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 I mean, is worthy of some thought and pondering, I think, because, the leadership of the school might not always feel the same stringent way about sharing video, right? And part of the school committee's role is to define policy that lives for the life of the district. And so, under what conditions would we? Obviously, if under legal compulsion, we don't have a choice. But up to that point, under what conditions would we want to, generally provide a guideline to the superintendent when making a decision? I think would be a worthy exercise.
Anybody else want to weigh in here? All right. So I move that we adjourn the regional school committee and the regional school committee only. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by me, seconded by Sarah Bess. Take a roll call vote. Do we unshare? I can't really see everybody here. Is there a freezing situation that happened?
I think so.
All right, I'm gonna do my best here. Allison.
Allison, aye.
Craig.
Craig, aye.
Irv.
Irv, aye. The camera is discriminating, of course, but
Right.
It's allowed to.
Right. Jennifer,
Yes.
Peter,
Peter, I.
like I already said, Sarah Beth.
You didn't, but I seconded. But I also would I.
Fair enough. Again, did I say Craig?
You missed my Pelham sister, Margaret.
Margaret, there we go.
Margaret, I. Thanks, Sarah Beth.
And then Steve. Oh, okay, now I can see everybody. And then Stephen.
Not here.
I swear I just saw his name on the
Oh,
list.
I'm so.
All right, Ben, I. So the regional school committee is adjourned.
Well, I'm seeing like double mics and double Dougs. Okay, I think it's back to normal. Okay, moving on with the Amherst only portion of the agenda. I don't believe we have minutes tonight. No. I think I'm logged in, right? There's no minutes attached, correct? No, okay. So we'll move on to Amherst only public comment. We did not receive any in advance of the meeting, so I see a couple people. So I'll just pause in case anybody who's in the meeting would like to offer public comment. Just raise your hand. Seeing none, I'll just take a moment to remind folks that we have multiple ways for people to submit public comment, all of which can be done at any time, does not have to be during the meeting. So the first one that's during the meeting, obviously you have to be in the meeting to offer public comment live. Always welcome that. You may email scpubliccomment@arps.org anytime up until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of our meeting. You may also leave a voicemail from any phone calling 413-362-1891. Or I believe you may also send a text message to that same phone number. And as long as all of those are done before 3 p.m. on the day of our meetings, your public comments will be included in the meeting and attached to the agenda and public record. And all of that information is in the agenda under the public comments section. With that, I'll turn it over to Mike for the superintendent's update.
Thank you. Sorry, I had my computer glitch, but I think I'm back to normal. Wide range of things tonight. So 10 days from now on the Friday the 20th, which is a teacher workday, we are hosting a state equity vaccine equity clinic, which involves anyone who comes gets a $75 gift card, usually to a supermarket or department store. There was one in the town, two in the town actually already, and I think they were like mostly Stop and Shop, which, you know, for many people like myself is the same as cash. So we send it out to families and to staff members today, but anytime between 12 and 4, we encourage people to register. There's a lot of interest in that. So we appreciate the state partnering with us, and this seems like a great opportunity in terms of the impact of boosters right now that we're seeing in terms of the data coming out, and also a financial incentive seem to, and so far, be working very well. I think it's really different than where there were a lot of incentives the first time there were vaccines, where people were, you know, eager to get them regardless. And I think the eagerness is somewhat muted for many people with the boosters. And what the state is telling us is these incentives have really gotten people over the finish line, and that's a good thing. So we're excited to host that. Actually, we also get a small but 4-digit monetary benefit from the state for hosting one of those clinics. So it actually is not a huge difference in our bottom line, but it's $2,000 that we wouldn't have had if we weren't hosting the clinic. So good for the district, good for students and staff. So we're excited to do it. Thanks, Debbie Westmoreland, who's been really spearheading this effort. Also good news last week, I think it was last week, but the weeks are getting a little blurry. which is we received a grant that would fund part of an electric school bus purchase. And so we'll talk about that when we get to Capitol. But very exciting. We talked last time, I think at the last Amherst School Committee meeting, about some other grants we received. So it's, we're doing really well. I did meet with the town manager and town finance director this afternoon about that grant. Because it involves, a significant outlay from the community, and they're bringing it up to their sustainability group. And more to come on that when we talk capital. But kudos to Doug and Rupert and Shannon Bernacchi and Doug's office, who applied for a competitive grant that we didn't frankly think we were going to get. And if that gets us closer to having a brand new electric bus, then that's a great thing. District safety protocols have been updated, and we've replaced the flip books from that were a little bit outdated. So we had them, the fire department, the police department, first responders go over them. So all of our staff have printed and electronic copies for updated safety protocols, which we want to make sure everybody has. Our report cards coming out next month at the Amherst level. For the first time, they are going to be digital, and that saves over 10,000 pieces of paper over the course of the year, significant amount of funds, also ease of access for many families. Anyone without an email address, we will print them out. So in terms of access, we believe we have that covered. It also makes the translation piece a lot easier for reasons I cannot totally describe to you, but it does. For English and Spanish, for non-Spanish languages, we'll continue to use printed copies. But we're looking forward to this, and we're doing a lot of parent trainings. We have, kind of videos about how to sign up for the PowerSchool portal for parents. This is also, for those of you who have secondary kids, the way grades work for upper grades for our secondary schools. So it's really good training. The only exception is kindergarten. We're still having paper and pencil because their report cards in kindergarten look a little bit different, and we thought it was more appropriate for them to have paper report cards, not paper and pencil, printed report cards for our kindergarten students. At Wildwood, all of the second and third grade classes going to the Champion Center, or went to the Champion Center, which is next to Mullen Center, to play games with the UMass women's basketball team. They're a phenomenal team. I was at Wildwood a couple weeks ago where they were outside. They've made this really wonderful relationship between the women's basketball team and Wildwood students, and neat experience. I know Fort River's also going over to some sporting events at UMass. And, as COVID hasn't gone away by any stretch, but we are trying to give students some enrichment activities and taking advantage of the fact that we have a flagship university of our state public school system in our town. So we're excited about that. Wildwood also is starting a couple after school clubs, a chess club and a chorus club. So we're excited about those as well. Martin Luther King Day at Crocker Farm is returning, and this is an annual tradition. Remember seeing Irv there quite a while ago. Irv always had a large role at Crocker Farm, so I thank you for that, Irv. But remember that my first year as principal, probably I think 2008, 2009, and I think Irv was a member of the school improvement team, school improvement planning team. So it's a wonderful event, fine-tuning dates, but if anyone's interested, let me know and I'll give you dates. And, we'd love for you to be able to go over. We're just finalizing that. It won't be next week, the Martin Luther King Day week. It'll be the following week. I was over at Fort River last Thursday, and for many of our Commandante staff, we did a surprise celebration of Three Kings Day. So we brought over some treats and just really wanted to thank our Commandante staff for the incredible amount of work they've done. That program's been crucial for all of our attempts to look at achievement opportunities for students who have been underserved by both our district and other districts around this Commonwealth and country before. And we just wanted to, make sure we had an extra thanks to them. And many of them do celebrate this holiday. So that was lovely. January 19th is Community Building Day at Fort River, intended to reestablish and strengthen grade level and classroom cohesiveness. What that involves is teachers choosing a lot of student choice of teachers choosing activities they're interested in leading. Students, going to different specials and having some choice in the day to, break up the winter and have a little more agency for everyone involved. So looking forward to that next week at the fort. And I think that is my update for this evening. Sorry, it's a little scattered today, but lots of good news to share.
Does anybody have questions? Jennifer.
Thanks, Mike, for that update. You've mentioned electronic report cards before, but this may be the first time you've mentioned that it requires parents to sign up for PowerSchool. And just as a personal anecdote for me, I had a really hard time figuring out how to sign up for Power School for my middle schooler. And I don't want to debate about Power School, but like, I kind of liked getting the paper report card and for my elementary student. And I guess I want to know, like, if like, will this can the schools keep track of parents of which students have and have not signed up for Power School? And if a student's parents haven't signed up yet for whatever reason, could they still get a paper report card, or is there another option for them if they just haven't followed the instructions or didn't get the email or just haven't signed up for Power School? Could they still get their child's report card?
Yeah, so I want to comment on that. I think you're right that it hasn't always been as well communicated in the past. We now have like instructional how-to videos and screenshot things. So I think the secondary schools will also benefit from the work that we're putting in on the elementary side. But we it was 11,000 pieces of paper. Just from a green environmental level, it was hard to justify from a financial level. And then print cartridges, as Doug could tell you about, because he is responsible for buying lots of those. It was hard to justify. So we are going to put every effort into making sure that families, regardless of if they have internet access, that they have what they need, and doing a lot of outreach that's starting next week. So it gives us 3-4 weeks to do that. But really the goal is to stop using as much paper in general in our schools for all the green reasons as well as others. Obviously for families without internet access, we're still going to print them. Like that's not a question for us. But one of the things that we continue to hear about when we receive feedback from families is, our elementary report cards are really long. There's a lot of pages to them. How they print out hasn't always been optimal. And so we're not really looking to add an option for paper. If families would like to print them out from Power School, they certainly can do that. But we're really pushing ours, same at the secondary level, to not be using that resource that way. And I think in terms of tracking who's gone on over 900 some odd kids, I think that's a really large task to ask the clerical staff to be able to do. So I definitely hear you, but we're putting all our eggs in the basket of training support. Literally when people come in, like, let's sit down at a computer in the lab, let's be able to work on this to provide, I think, what your experience didn't provide for you, and I'm not trying to make about yours, but you talked about you're not alone in that, and see how we can expand the education part of it to give a better access for folks, so people don't have to go over 4 times. And I've seen the work that our IS department's done, and it's really outstanding in terms of ease of access, because I'm like middle of the road with technology. Like, I'm not great, I'm not right, but I think it'll be a lot smoother than it's been for some folks who are new to the secondary level, especially now. I think there was a lot of rollout 10, 12 years ago when we went to digital at the secondary, and then over time it sort of wanes a bit. But I think we have a lot better resources this time around.
Great, thank you.
I wouldn't mind receiving that how-to, because to this day, I've never figured out how to find the report cards in Power School.
So loud and clear that we can share the good work that we've done at elementary across our 1 through 12th grade. Yeah.
Any other questions? I have a question.
Just one other thing, that our IS department does have a quicker way to track who's signed up for Power School and who doesn't, and we'll be able to generate lists and follow up as needed. So there is a mechanism within Power School to see who's logged on, who hasn't. So I think I don't want to overcommit or overpromise, but they have a ability to track that in a better way than the school clerical staff do.
Good. I have a question on the electric school bus, but I think I'll hold it until we're talking about it within the Capitol, because it probably is more involved. If there's no more questions, chair's update. I don't have any update for this evening. So I'm going to look to the school committee to see if there's any announcements or updates from school committee members. Seeing none. Then we'll move into our first item of new and continuing business, and I see that Donna and Margaret have joined us. So our first topic is an update on the elementary school building project. And there's a presentation in our agendas. Welcome, Donna and Margaret.
Good evening.
I'll turn it over to you all.
Thank
Or
you.
Mike or Ben, if you want to tee it up, I don't know. Yeah.
I think you've all met Donna and Margaret before, so I think they're ready to roll, right?
Yeah, Margaret,
Okay.
I know I gave Margaret a heads up that we were ahead, which congratulations, guys. Like, that's so nice, right? Oh, there she is. I think she was going to tee it off and then I was going to take it over.
Well, Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks for having us back. We set this up as a kind of quick update, and happy and hopefully enthusiastic update about the project design, because although the building committee, so like Ben, has seen a lot of this, and Mike, the school committee hasn't had their very own briefing. So that's really what this is about. It's just to talk about the design. And to that end, I'm going to be sort of in the back room at this point. So I'm really just going to turn this over to Donna, unless anybody has any questions before we start. So go. Okay. So
Okay.
Donna, take it away.
Awesome. All right. Let me see. I always have a problem for whatever reason. I am going to try to share my screen. Let's see, I might have to share a window. Here we go. So can everyone see the screen? Yeah. Okay,
Yep.
great. I'm going to put it in place. So the preview that you saw hopefully didn't do very much for you, because they're actually like movies or walkthroughs of the buildings. So I'm going to put it in play. We don't always have great success with this, so let me know if you're unable to see this. Can you see this in play mode?
We're seeing
Just the cover, right?
just the cover. Yep.
Ah, here we go again.
Well, Donna, I
yeah.
can see the slides on the side, so I think it's just picking a view. I think you don't want to be in slide layout, perhaps.
Yeah,
There's a
it's
different layout on
yeah,
there.
I'll try. Thank you. I will try that.
I think this will work, by the way.
Okay, here we go. It's
yeah.
just not going to be as pretty, so that's okay. So we are super excited to be back. I really want to thank the school building committee and the staff within the Amherst School District. Mike and his team, Rupert, Ben, everyone has just been accommodating, available, and always there to help us navigate all of the ins and outs of the entire project. So we're really excited. Of course, the program, first and foremost, we have remained true to the preliminary design program, as well as the preferred schematic or the study as far as square footage. We are still at 70,500 program area, gross square footage of 105,750 gross square feet. So the space summary hasn't changed, but we have spent so much time working with staff to finalize the spatial relationships and adjacencies. And I'll just walk through those as we go through the presentation. Here is the updated site plan. It probably doesn't look too much different than where we were, slightly refined. What we were able to do, I don't know if can you see my mouse moving? No. Okay. We were able to move the building slightly south on the site, which allowed us to enlarge the area for the community fields to the north. I would like to say for the community fields, we have not made any decisions on the community fields, nor do we need to at this point. The layouts of the fields and the organization of them do not need to occur at this point in time. we've dedicated an area of the site for those fields. But what we've been able to do is shift the building slightly south that will allow us to provide all of the play area and outdoor learning to be on the north and the east part of the building, separating it from the drop-off and pickup and parking areas. And it also gives us a nicer buffer from the existing building. If you see it dotted in the field area to the north of the site, it gives us a larger buffer from construction, and we'll actually be able to complete the building and the surrounding play areas during the construction process. So when the students move to the new school, they'll have play areas and outdoor learning available to them immediately while we tear down the building and finish up the rest of the site. Working with DPW and traffic engineers, Jason Guilford and others, this has been great, Rupert as well. What we were able to do is, I'm really bummed you cannot see my mouse, but the yellow arrows on the south entrance, that will be bus only. So we have adequate bus drop-off for 12 buses in total. They'll queue up, and then there's a drive area where it says service entry, but that's actually going to be a really nice second entry to the school for students to be dropped off and entered into a stair, and you'll see that in a 3D view in a minute. We have a van pull-off area, drop-off and parking, so that they can take their time to load and unload the students without interfering with the bus loop and pick up and drop off. To the north, you'll see in red, we have the main parking area, be 170 parking spaces. We have, that will be for the parent drop off and pickup. So you'll see there's sufficient space for 60 cars in total. And depending on the need, our goal would be so that the first person in the queue parks just a little bit further north of the building, but if needed, you can actually pull the parents to drop off further north. But we know that probably won't happen. They'll stop at the front door. So we think we have adequate parking and queuing for a parent drop off. So as we zoom in a little bit closer to focus on the school area itself, you'll see again the bus loop to the south, the portion of the drop-off area with handicap parking directly from the main entrance. The main entrance is on the western part of the building. What's in light green is the main office. So you'll see they'll be entering those doors. We have ample area for outdoor play. To the south, we have a pollinator garden and other vegetated raised garden beds, which are south of the building with some canopies and some shading. What you see in the kind of moon-shaped blue is not only for stormwater management, but it's also going to be a great opportunity for outdoor learning. We've incorporated 2 full-size basketball courts, a couple half-size basketball courts. What you see in the dark green with circles that kind of look like trees, that's going to be a natural kind of exploring area for the students and staff. There'll be like wooden benches or tree stumps for them to sit on and learn. So it'll be another opportunity for outdoor learning. And then you'll see a bunch of circles and squiggles around the building. That's really going to be what we consider hardtop play, so that the students will be able to play outdoors during the winter months. Inclement weather won't get, you know, it will stay, it won't get mushy from the grass or whatever, but students can be out there and it can be shoveled and plowed. It will also serve as a 360-degree emergency egress around the building. We have dining outside the cafeteria. The cafeteria is shaded in orange, which will be facing north. And so we have an area identified for outdoor dining for the students as well. The two larger circles were flanking the rectangle that says play. We have a smaller playground for the younger kids, a little larger playground for the older kids. And then we've identified an area for play for students, which would be not hardscape, not concrete or asphalt, but a soft surface that they can run and play without having to go to the fields. So this looks pretty well defined. What we like to say is the elements are there, but we're really looking forward the next phase to engage the students and even engage those that are interested in developing the playgrounds and the equipment. So this is just the preliminary features that we're sharing here. So when we start walking into the building, you'll see again at the western part, it says vestibule. You'll see music is there with the light green as the main office. The floor plans haven't changed, but just as a refresher, everyone will walk through the double vestibule. There'll be a main office person being able to oversee anyone coming into the building. They would have to buzz to get into the vestibule. And then you'll have the ability as well to have someone check people in within the vestibule before they actually enter into the building. So we have the main office suite with the nurse at the entry of the building. And then this is what we're considering the community wing. We have the cafeteria with a platform or stage. And right behind that in the light blue is the music suite. We have a beautiful music room with 3 practice rooms for all of your instrumental, orchestra, and your fabulous band music program. Those rooms will actually abut the stage so that they can also serve as a green room. Across from the cafeteria is the gymnasium. And then we have a main stair that will take us upstairs. As you walk further into the building, you'll see the brown spaces. That is our kind of core receiving, trash recycling area that will be completely kind of screened off from the rest of the building on the exterior. And again, we'll walk you through the exterior with a main stair, a second main stair that will connect to all 3 floors. There's an elevator where it says ILC motor room. There says ELEV, that's the main elevator. And then we'll be able to close off the academic wing, all the spaces that are in purple, so that the community can use the front portion of the building without going into the academic areas. Not much has changed in the academic areas. We have 5 classrooms per grade. They neatly stack one on top of the other so that you have flexibility going forward. We have the special ed programs also integrated with all of their support spaces. On the second floor, you'll see it's going to start looking a little bit like a cake. It's going to be tiered. There's not as much program on the second floor as there is on the first floor. We have a STEM area that is flanked by the media center to the, well, it's to the west of this plan. We have the art and a science tech engineering classroom that will also be serving as a second art room. And then again, back into the academic areas, very similar to the first floor, 5 classrooms per grade, 2 grades, along with the special education and ELL spaces. On the third floor, again, now the program even gets a little bit smaller at the front of the building. This is primarily all academic spaces. We do have a teacher workroom and dining room on the second and third floor, as well as guidance and an adjustment counselor. So there's always staff on every single floor. Okay, so for the big reveal, let's see if this works. So some of this goes a little fast, so just bear with me while it goes really fast. Here is a look of the outside of the site of the building. This is the entrance area. The building, as you can see, has a lot of natural light embracing the site, bringing daylight in with views to the outside. The material of the building is masonry with a lot of natural light. And although it's a very simple form, we wanted to break up the mass. So you'll see that we're just using different colors of pretty much the same material, and also trying to be playful with spreading a little bit of color throughout the classroom wing. It's as we turn the building, come around the site, you'll see that we're trying to bring natural light into the stairwells so that there's you never feel confined in any one space. You can see how a compact 3-story building really just fully opens up the site. We've started to develop a little bit of the outdoor learning area. You see the raised beds to the south of the site. We have sunshades, of course, on the south side of the building. And you'll see this orange canopy. That is the extension of the kindergarten classrooms, which are slightly larger than the general classrooms. We have the entrance behind the bus, of course, move that bus, that you'll see. And so it's going to be a nice, beautiful, large entry for students arriving by bus, or they could actually just walk to the front of the building. That's the gym that you're seeing in front of you behind the bus, with main administration coming along the front so that they have views of the buses arriving and students arriving. So we'll take you into the building. Here's the entrance through the first vestibule. They'll have a nice welcoming person welcoming them before they actually enter the building. We wanted this area to be bright, light filled. We're still working on, as you can see, we're just in schematic design, but we're really envisioning bringing a lot of art, whether it's student form, whether it's, different types of art, whether it's paintings or whatever, but we're really looking forward to developing that. You'll see the cafeteria again, lots of glass so that you can see everything that's going on, and it gives you this great connection to the outdoors. That's the stair in front of you that will take you to the second and third floors. And then a peek into the gymnasium. It is hardwood floor. I don't know why it's flickering on us, but it is a hardwood floor again, natural light, but not too much so that you can't shoot a hoop and be blinded by the light. This is a quick glimpse of the cafeteria. As you'll see, beautiful natural light, so you just feel connected to the outdoors. On the right, what you'll see is a small entry into the music suite. We need a little ramp to get up the 3 little steps from the platform from an accessibility perspective. And then we'll have the music suite to the right and the main administration to the left. We're not going to go back outside. I'm going to take you upstairs. So this is a glimpse of the academic wing. We have 3 classrooms connected by what we call a project area, and they will be by grade, of course, but the lockers will be outside, and you'll see there's ample storage above the lockers. There'll be individual lockers for each of the students. We wanted to bring some natural light in, so we have some glazing or light above the locker area to bring natural light in and to make this connection as that this is an extension of the classrooms as well. this is a great opportunity for project-based learning, for small group instruction, individualized instruction, and even for independent instruction as the students get older. There's always natural light and light windows so that the kids aren't completely without oversight. And again, we're really trying to have every space look similar. We will spend some time identifying wayfinding. Oh, sorry, I want to take you back. Identifying wayfinding so that everyone knows, oh, I'm going to the blue area, the green area. That was a quick glimpse of the classroom. And again, we look forward to defining each of these project areas so students and staff know exactly which area they're supposed to report to. We'll have a little area for seating, whiteboards or marker boards for instructional areas. Now this one's going to go too slow. Got one too fast, one too slow. But you'll see that they're very large, and it really is a great way to put the students' belongings, lockers outside of the classroom so we can really maximize the classrooms for learning. Along the corridors, we have tack surfaces as well so that if you can identify that with student artwork. Here's a quick glimpse of the library, and this is going to go fast, and I don't know if I can control it, so hold on. But what you'll see here is this beautiful space that will be light-filled, have great views to the outdoor, completely flexible, area for teaching. There's areas for storytelling behind us. All of the stacks or bookshelves inside, not out on the perimeter, will be movable so that we can reconfigure this for whatever you need. And that went really fast. And so that is pretty much it. Just give you an update. We have cost estimates that will be presented or delivered to the school building committee tomorrow. We have a meeting on Friday to review and talk about the cost estimates, and then if possible, a vote to submit the schematic design to MSBA. If not, we've scheduled another meeting. We have a town council presentation on January 23rd and a vote for the debt exclusion language February 6th. We'll be submitting to MSBA March 2nd the actual binder for the schematic design, and then MSBA will vote for their approval on April 26th. So that is what I have. I apologize. I wish my cursor was working, but Allison, if you like, do you want me to take it down, or do you think I'm happy to leave it up if anyone has any questions?
I think leave it up in case people have specific questions on any of the slides. It was thank you as always, like so engaging and beautiful and just great way to experience the work, the design work that you and everybody's been doing. So I so much better than just sort of blueprints and that.
I know, that's
really.
You were probably saying, what's this presentation when Mike sent it over to you? So.
No, I wasn't, because I'm you wowed us before with the video, so
awesome.
I anticipated that, but I appreciate that. So you mentioned the building committee will be looking at costs later this week, and that's why we're not seeing that now.
Correct.
That's correct.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. We're fine tuning them all. Yep.
All right. I'm going to look to my colleagues to see if they have any questions. Peter.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said this the last time you showed us videos, but it's, you know, Amherst can be a rough and tumble local political town sometimes, but if you sort of put that whole process thing aside, and you just focus on the vision that is being created here, the the community investment in public education. This is so inspiring. This is such a beautiful expression of the town's values, I think, in terms of the simplicity, the naturalness. So beautiful. It's did such a great job designing with light. I mean, the light theme here is just so wonderful. And I'm glad you mentioned about the 3-story versus 2 decision and how that really opens up the outdoors. I think you've done a really fantastic job with the outdoor areas as well, in terms of, we're not just investing in a building, right? We're investing in a place, and the building exists with the place, through that light, and then all the beautiful things that you've designed around it. So it's a really wonderfully inspiring vision. I hope that you lead with the videos when you are at the forums and people are seeing the buildings, because I think even though this is obviously a big decision for the town and a large investment, it's a really inspiring vision of the future of public education in Amherst. So I just really want to thank you for your hard work.
Yeah, thank you. Peter, I just would also like to say, this isn't our vision. This is your vision, and everyone has worked so hard to make sure that this is your vision, and we just applaud Amherst in every way, from sustainability to the level of detail for the educational program, to the natural light, to like you said, it can be political, but not for anything other than trying to do their best for the students, and we're just really excited to be part of the process.
I especially loved just to add to that, I especially loved seeing the video of the outdoor experience and sort of the work that you've started doing on some of that outdoor learning experience and the play spaces. And, sometimes you get the sense that the play spaces are an afterthought and they're just sort of plopped in there, and made to do. And yet this is so intentional in terms of how it's designed, how it's laid out, and how the school community will be using it. So that seeing that and getting that sort of video tour was really great. Any questions? And I believe that that meeting on the 23rd, sort of everybody, the school committee is invited to attend that. It is not a joint meeting; it's a town council meeting, and an opportunity for the town councilors to ask questions. But my understanding is that the school committee is invited to attend that part of that meeting.
Great. Margaret has her hand raised.
Okay, Margaret.
Yeah.
Donna, do you mind taking this down for a minute? I
No.
just wanted to make sure that people know that we've got 2 community forums planned. So just to quickly show, we have been.
Thank you. Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah.
It's a team effort. I'm just pulling up the everybody see this? This is the website today. So there is, so this is the landing page now, which lets everybody know about the forums, and I'll just switch that. We've updated the timeline so that people can see the overall timeline for the project, as well as to see the debt exclusion vote. And I think I can do this. If you go to the last page, Mike and his folks have already sent this out, but this flyer is there with the live link to the forum. So we'll have one forum on the morning of January 25th at 8:30 and one in the early evening of Thursday, January 26th. So pass the word, share the flyer. If anybody's, all they have to do is go to the first page of the website to find the link. So if you lose track and you're like, how do I get there? First page of the website. So
and just to add to that, they're going to be the same. So don't feel like if you can't make one, we just wanted to make sure we could reach a broader audience. So we're going to be the roadshow.
Exactly. So that's our update. Obviously, there'll be a lot of discussion this week as we start to have this discussion on the project cost with the building committee on Friday. But please follow the bouncing ball and get the word out about the project.
Will do. Any questions? Additional questions? Quiet group tonight.
You're early and quiet. I don't know what's going on here.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you again for joining us
Sure.
tonight, and look forward to those forums later this month.
Thank you. We'll see you all
Okay.
soon. Have a great
Okay.
evening.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Margaret.
Okay, so we're going to move into the next item, which is the draft staffing plan for the elementary schools for next year. And before we dive into that, Mike emailed us earlier today with a presentation that questions and sort of conversations and discussions that we want to have with the school committee about the move of the sixth grade to the middle school and the timing of that. Because that's not on our agenda tonight, we're not going to be discussing that beyond, because we can't, from an open meeting law perspective. We didn't agenda a conversation about discussing the pros and cons of the timing of moving sixth grade to the middle school. So we are, but it is related to the staffing plan and then the next item on the agenda, which is the budget. So I'm going to try to keep us on track so that we're teeing up what we're going to be talking about at a future meeting, as opposed to having a conversation tonight about the ideas that Mike has shared with us. And we'll probably share during the conversation tonight. We can ask clarifying questions, but that can help us as we think about this in advance of the next meeting. But to have a robust discussion about it is not something that we can do because that's not part of our agenda this evening. So I just want to sort of offer that. And so I hope that you all will help me and help us stay on track with that part of that need. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to, I think, Mike, to tee up the staffing plan. And there was a presentation memo in our agenda.
Yeah, thank you. And so this is a hard one to talk about given the limitations that Allison rightfully mentioned, but I do feel like it is worth dialogue, and I think more worth me sharing that piece and future dialogue. I think it's also the case that I'll provide a little more narrative context than what's in slides here tonight. I think it's important to go back before we go forward. So why are we moving to sixth grade, right? And so there's three primary reasons. If you go back to the original presentations, one is developmental needs of students that the vast majority of our colleagues, both in MSAN network, in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and the country, operate middle schools that are more than 2-year schools for a whole host of reasons. And almost all of those have sixth grade in the middle schools, the exception of some really small schools generally, but a 7-8 middle school is very, very atypical at this point, unless it's attached to a high school. It's really a 7 through 12 building like Frontier. So that was a primary reason, going back to a committee that met about this years and years ago, thinking about after the former building project failed, looking at a lot of different things, and there was many iterations of groups that looked at this. The second reason was what we just talked about, the elementary building project. This body committed to having K-5 schools as part of that project. That was a second reason. And a third reason, and the primary reason we were talking about moving the sixth graders before the building project was completed, was that when COVID hit, we made a pretty someone described this the other day, I think it's true. It doesn't feel like it in hindsight, but it's a pretty bold move to take out the quads at Fort River and Wildwood. So we made halvesies instead of quads. We did that for ventilation. Kudos to Rupert Roy Clark and his team, because that ended up really shifting and increasing the ventilation, which not only with COVID, but frankly with flu and RSV and a lot of respiratory illnesses going on right now, has made it possible to reopen in a way that made us feel confident, that had air quality and ventilation that is in everyone's health and best interest. So I mentioned those in order because they are in order. It wasn't a random noticing. Like, we really felt like this is the right thing for 6th grade students developmentally. We had a building project that it solved that problem. And then we had this unexpected until March 2020 need to change the configuration and infrastructure of our buildings. So getting to the specific agenda point, there's a slide deck that was in the packet. I'm not going to present it tonight, that was shared with staff on January 3rd. I really appreciate it. We had about 80 staff members there. I didn't count, but that's a couple of our estimates. We shared detailed drafts of staffing projections across the 4 elementary schools. People were fantastic. The questions were spot on. I thought there was clearly a lot of motion in the room. There's a lot of change, and yet and some of that was expressed, but I thought it was really, I really do appreciate our staff. They were incredibly, thoughtful in their questions, their feedback. And then there was a staff preferences survey, and that survey not only asked about what individual staff members would like to do in the future with some rank ordering, but also what are some general feedback that they'd have for us. Did those, staffing rosters look right? Or did it look inequitable based on the number of students, or were there other factors we should be considering? And we got some really helpful feedback, because one of the things that you'll notice if you look through that other presentation is that we did look like we were consolidating at least 3 classrooms for next year. And that's just based on class size and school committee, guidelines, pieces like that. And one of the questions that came up was, if we're going to consolidate all those classrooms, does the space needs get mitigated somewhat? Right? If we're going to have fewer students in schools separate from the 6th grade, just because we have a declining enrollment, and we're going to have some larger classes, larger than typical for Amherst. For many communities, they'd be incredibly desirable. I want to be cautious about saying that. Are our space needs as dire as we thought they would be? And that's why we have feedback and information sessions, is to gather questions that we haven't thought of in the same way. So I do want to thank the staff for doing that. And that's why we do it. It's not just to check a box. It's because we actually want to receive questions and feedback and thoughts and critiques. That's the nature of why we do these things, much like we're doing for the building project in a couple of weeks. And so that was towards the end of last week. Friday, I was off. I celebrate that holiday with my family, but one call I was going to take was from my good friend, Dr. Slaughter, who was putting together the Amherst budget. And so it was not a pleasant holiday call that I received from Dr. Slaughter, because we knew there would be a deficit. That wasn't a surprise, having gone through another district that we work for and looking at numbers that they're not the same, but there's some similar trends that often occur between multiple districts that Doug and I work for. But we were both surprised, I think it's fair to say, Doug, we were both surprised that the anticipated deficit is $800,000. We'll get into that after this agenda item. And we had significant concerns about that. And this is the last year of ESSER funding. And so with 2 more cycles after this year to get to the building project where we will be able to realize efficiencies, Doug and I got very, very concerned. It was about the budget. And so that has shifted some of our thinking. Not that we always think about how to be efficient, but it's shifted our thinking to think about that level of deficit. And even if ESSER funds help us to get there to be okay for next year, what does that look like for the 2 years after, where the deficit grows and we have a structural imbalance because we don't have ESSER anymore? So, I'm sick of talking about fiscal cliffs. You're all sick of hearing me talk about fiscal cliffs, but this is exactly what we're starting to see. It's becoming into a clearer focus for us. The second piece is the question from staff made us look back at the elementary enrollments and looking back to when we originally started this process. So for instance, the report that's dated January 8th, 2020 from NESDEC, who does our, they do most districts in Massachusetts or in New England, frankly, their enrollment reports, they estimated that we would have 1,014 students for next year. Our current projections show only 946. So when we were looking at, oh yeah, it's going to be really tight, even separate from COVID, we were projecting 50 more students, or more than, than we currently have in our schools. And the third piece is a consideration that's is no surprise to you all, because we've been talking about it, is as DESE has weighed in on these different districts aspects and unique school, more than we probably thought at the beginning of how thick that line was. Moving to 4 elementary schools, we've had some complexity as it relates to staffing and finances that were not fully anticipated when we started this process. I think we knew it was going to be somewhat of its own school, but not perhaps with the kind of, we were hoping for what I would call dotted line boundaries. And what we got were thick, heavy, bold font boundary lines between the schools. And I'm not talking about the physical space. I'm talking about the staffing, the finances, school code, all those other pieces. And so, when presented with all this new information or evolving information, it caused me, and I'll say singular at this point, starting on Saturday morning, quite early in the morning, to be thinking about, is this a moment we need to step back and say, what's in the best interest of kids here? And so I want to thank my team. I typically don't bother them too much on the weekends because I want people to have weekends. We believe in work-life balance, and this was not a weekend where I provided that for all of my staff, to be fair, because I knew we were having this meeting tonight, and I didn't feel like this conversation can wait. We had many of our admin team met at length yesterday afternoon for open dialogue and conversation about these items, and I wanted to hear from assistant principals, district directors about these items and what people thought about it, and what made sense, what additional data we needed. So really, it comes down to 2 key questions. Is it feasible to delay the move of 6th grade until fall 26, given this new information? And if it is feasible, is in the best interest of our students? Both are questions that need to be answered. And, originally, we didn't know we'd have this budget, what I would call crisis for the next 3 years. We talked about fiscal cliff, but we didn't see the scale being quite what it is. Some of that's inflationary. You'll find out about that from Doug in a couple minutes. We didn't anticipate quite the enrollment drop we've had. And we didn't anticipate the complexity of the multiple district aspect. And so that has us thinking and rethinking and replanning and mapping things out. And so the request I'd have for the committee is, you had a Tuesday off originally on January 24th. There was oddly no meeting, but wondering if the Amherst School Committee meeting is willing to come back. And what we'd like to do is have a little bit of time to, look at what it would actually look like. What do the projected maps look like, especially as we get to 2025, 26 at each school? What are the budget implications of this decision? But we want to make an effective comparison so that we can have more data, more information, and more consideration. I want to be candid here. I know there's huge risks in even bringing up the conversation tonight. And, I made the determination. I think it was in the best interest of kids, despite that we have lots of great planning going on. And I feel very confident in the academic programming for the 6th grade to be at the middle school. These factors made us reconsider and wanting to have more conversation. We did initial look. We're looking at these again. We actually think there might be one fewer classroom needed at one of our schools. But, what you start looking at is the current year and how many sections. And at Wildwood, you see a pretty significant drop of sections as projected. So some of the space issues at Wildwood look like they can be okay. Same at Crocker Farm, and may even be a little better, meaning fewer sections needed at Crocker Farm. We still have to look at that a little more. Fort River is really where the challenges lie as it relates to space and that particular conundrum. So what we want to do in 2 weeks is bring back, what does this actually look like with maps and each year, and what is, that kind of work is the work that we'd like to do. I think it's important for us to note that there is no retreat on the fact that we believe that 6th graders will be in the middle school. They should be in the middle school. It's really about a when, not if. And I think it's an important consideration to state explicitly. Regardless of whether we stay the course or not, we need to balance elementary staffing levels. We are really out of balance because the enrollments of the schools have shifted significantly over the last 6 years. You saw that in prior presentations, and that's still going to happen. Our budgets are still going to be hard no matter what we do. We're still going to have budget reductions over the next few years. Really, the question is whether we can mitigate them in some way. And the tremendous amount of work that staff have done in developing the 6th grade at Arms model is valuable, and it's going to be realized in coming years. The question again gets to when. So my last 2 slides are very broad, 10,000-foot level of benefits and potential challenges. But one of the reasons we're looking at it, maybe even the primary reason we're looking at that, is I think I believe right now it provides us more flexibility imagining budget reductions over the next few years. They're going to happen. But spreading our staff across 4 schools for a couple years leads to inefficiencies that are going to be challenging for us given the fiscal climate. It will allow us more time to explore further integration of the 6th grade to Arms, right? I sort of agree with some of the comments and public comment at our other meeting about, can we break down some of those artificial barriers and have a little more of an integrated approach if we have a little more time to plan? Some of the feedback we received in the survey is people were feeling like it's 2 changes, right? It's 6th grade change and then this building project change that involves closing of one school and opening another. I think people could argue that either way, but I wanted to list it because I thought it was interesting. It hopefully would allow us a more targeted use of short-term, what I would call non-sustainable funds, ESSER and the ARPA funds from the town, and provides a bit more time to resolve the logistical issues, some of which we discussed tonight. Potential drawbacks are that, I think everyone's going to have to sort of readjust ourselves to class sizes in Amherst. Historically, our class sizes most of the years I've been here have been average under 20. It was rare that we had classes of 22 or 23. I will say in surrounding towns, that's the typical average, not even the high end. And I think if we're going to talk about space needs, we may have to become more comfortable with having class sizes that are more typical in surrounding communities. Particularly above kindergarten and 1st grade, and we may even have to cap some grade levels. We've done it before where we've said, no, actually, if you come into the Fort River zone and you're in this grade level, you have to attend a different school because that grade level is capped and we'll have to transport you to a different site. We may have to make some sort of uncomfortable decisions that way. Fort River space is going to be particularly tight. Right now, we're struggling at all the schools, particularly with instrumental music, but also specialist classes. Right now, some of the instrumental music classes at Wildwood are taught in that front entryway, which is not ideal. And I really thank the instrumental music teachers. Can't say it enough for how flexible they are, but there's a limit to flexibility and where it starts impacting their academic program. And I think we're hitting that place. And so I do have some major concerns about that we're going to have to map out. There's also lots of people excited for this change. Right. And kids in particular who I met with Mary Kiley, who are really excited. And I mentioned the world language piece here, but there's a real risk there as well. So all that's to say that, sort of in talking with my leadership team and doing some real deep reflection and introspection, I think it's worth it to come back in 2 weeks, map this out, and take a look at it. I think we owe it to, I feel like I owe it to the community to say some things have changed and we should look about what's the best course of action over the next 3 years. And, so none of this is particularly comfortable. I know there's risks, again, as I said earlier, of even just this conversation tonight, as well as 2 weeks from now. You go long way down a tunnel, right? And you're almost at the light, and now you're thinking about whether that's the right way to go or at the right pace in this case. And there's some real risks there in terms of perception and confidence and all those pieces. And at the end of the day, when I look at the budget, I get really concerned. And the budget drives what we do for kids. That's the end of the day. If that's what drives the staff that we have and the materials and resources we have that make a difference for kids, and preserving that is a piece that if it wasn't for the budget, I probably wouldn't be having this conversation. But the budget is what it is right now, and that's what we're looking at. So it's a hard one. It's been a hard one for me. It's a hard one for us. I thank my leadership group and principals, assistant principals, directors for digging into this. And every time we talk about it, we kind of peel the onion and get deeper and deeper. And I guess what we're asking for is a little more time from the Amherst School Committee to come back to you with a little more or a lot more information so that we can make not quite an apples to apples, that's probably overstating what we're able to do, but closer to that, so we can compare what we think is in the best interest of kids from space, finances, and then resources for the next 3 years. So that's a mouthful. I apologize for the length, but this is an incredibly important decision, for us to be talking about collectively as a community. And I didn't feel like I could sit on it any longer. And I apologize that, things didn't come up in a way where we were having this conversation earlier, but some of these things sort of evolved over time, and some of them literally came from a conversation with Dr. Slaughter and me on Friday afternoon. And when new data comes, I think we have to consider it, and not to say we will change, but at least consider it and have that conversation. So that's sort of, I'll stop talking and see, I'll go back to the chair and see what conversation she would entertain or not, but I just wanted to share my perspective this evening, and appreciate you, everyone, bearing with me.
Yeah, I think it's important that we have this information, and at least no matter what decision is made, that we've had the conversation and done it with open eyes, right? So I think staying on the staffing question, because you've talked about sort of some of the things that we've learned as we've been planning for the move, and that the sixth grade will be essentially a fourth elementary school, and some of the staffing inefficiencies, or that's scratch that. That's a poor choice of words, but some of the inefficiencies that's related to staffing models to fulfill that as a separate school. And I'm just curious, what are some of those things that, because I think we knew going into it that we would want to have some sort of administrator that was, an Amherst elementary administrator, and not sort of fold it completely into the region. I think we knew going into this from the very beginning that was an unlikely model, that we would need that additional. And in looking at the original staffing plan, we show specials teachers moving moving between the schools, including the middle school. And I'm just curious about, is that necessary because of the DESE requirements, versus having some of the teachers in the middle school sort of take on some of those specials programs, right? So, or sixth grade instruction. So I'm just curious sort of what's driving that.
Yeah, so I think there's kind of three distinct aspects. So one is the inefficiencies of adding, what I would call administrative overhead, not just the principal, but I think originally we were hoping like maybe it can be shared administrative team, and that sort of became more challenging to think of. But also, the office staff. So, we'd be adding staff members that it's hard in our current context to sensitive topics. So I'm trying to think about how to talk about it without identifying roles that would, perhaps be made uncomfortable. But when there's not this other move that changes from 3 schools to 2 K-5 schools, the redistribution of staff becomes more challenging because you're taking away 1/7 of the students, so 15% of students. And so it doesn't work neatly to take, this person will take 15% of the X number, whatever the staffing is, right? Classroom teachers works really neatly. A lot of other people don't work so neatly. So there's some of that, right? There's some of just the administrative overhead that you need to create a new school. And then there's some that just literally the travel, right? So if someone's going to teach 80% one school and 20% another, that means every day they're driving over from Crocker Farm, that's 12 minutes or whatever it is, to the middle school. So I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but over the course of a year, it is quite a bit. And because they're different districts, they have a right to those positions. So even if there was a middle school person who had flexibility, could be there, it's a different district. So the kind of contractual rules apply. So we end up with a really stretched teaching force that when we go from 3 K-6 elementary schools, and then we go down to 2, we have a lot of efficiencies that we can realize and make those changes more naturally. But when we're adding, making a really small schools in one place, we get really inefficient. I mean, frankly, and this is probably the wrong thing to say, but when we had 4 elementary schools in Amherst, many of you may not have been here, but Marks Meadow is wonderful. So I'm not at all suggesting anything negative about Marks Meadow. And it led to some real challenges with staffing, because when you have a really small school, it's hard to staff it the same way. There's inefficiencies that come from small schools, and we're creating that without resolving some of the things on the other end. So, and I'm trying to be really cautious, just because these are people's jobs and livelihoods, and I wish I could speak in more detail, more comfortably in detail. And I think we will be able to in 2 weeks a little bit when it's more on the topic. But it's also the case, this is the last point I'll make, that we are going to have to make budget cuts. And when you're stretching staff between 4 schools and you have to make budget cuts, it eliminates some of the ability to make some of those cuts further away from kids. I think that's probably as far as I can go, but yeah, that's hopefully that's helpful. I know it's not as specific as I'd like to be, but it's probably where I can be.
Yeah, no, that's helpful to just scope out sort of what's causing that in a way that we hadn't anticipated. Irv, do you have a question? And I'm just going to say it again. We're not discussing the proposal on the timing. We can discuss staffing, but we can't. So it's clarifying questions on sort of the topic about timing.
Yes, I really want to commend Doug and Mike for your transparency and honesty. When one who's in a leadership position comes face to face with something that is a quandary that involves large kinds of decisions that have impacts on enormous numbers of people, as well, not only just staff, but the students and the whole community. Not only that, obviously there's going to be a lot of questions, and Doug and you and Mike are going to have to prepare to withstand the storm, because people are going to say, "Hey, why didn't you know all these things in advance?" So prepare for that. But all I want to say is that in my book, from where I'm standing, I really want to congratulate you for being honest, upfront, transparent, bringing this to us unvarnished, and doing it in such a way that was and is incredibly professional.
Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, so +1 to what Irv says. I mean, I think there's there's such a thing as sunk cost fallacy, where you put so much time and energy into something and it creates a momentum of its own. And so all the inclination is to not want to derail something. So, but I mean, we're talking about 2 weeks, right, to pause and then come back and discuss. So regardless of what the scenario is going forward, even if we stay on track for this fall, we will have done it in a much more informed way and be much more confident about it, for having done this 2-week exercise. So yeah, so I appreciate it. And you don't have to apologize for mentioning the fiscal cliff. I mean, I've been one of the members beating that drum for a while now. So and if people don't know what we're talking about, right now we're planning for FY. So I see Irv too. Right now this budget we're talking about is FY24. FY24 meaning the year that starts in September of 2023. Then you have 25 and 26, and then hopefully FY27 new building comes online. So in other words, we have this 2 fiscal years in which we can't use ESSER funds. This one-time money, which creates budget issues. It would normally create budget issues, and now we have this catalyst of this bad news deficit that you just discussed. So yeah, so I appreciate you pumping the brakes and giving attention to that budget. I guess my only clarifying question then, and so we'll save the discussion for a couple weeks from now, is when you talk about one of the potential benefits is allowing more use of targeted funds. Are you talking only about ESSER funds, which of course can only be used for FY24, or do you mean potentially other? I guess what I'm wondering about is like town ARPA funds, which I think can be used beyond FY24. So for those two bridge fiscal years, those gap years, FY25 and 6, that one could theoretically apply one-time money to that isn't ESSER. Is that what you're thinking about, or
It is. I mean, there's.
or?
Yeah, it is. And I had some conversations with the town a little bit this afternoon, preliminary conversations, because I was really directed to 6th grade, and we would have to get more explicit of how that's connected to this. And I see a through line there, but it's not just mine to determine. But you're thinking about it absolutely correctly. And one of the concerns that we had is, as we looked at the costs of that 2-year interval, and how much ARPA funds were given, it was more than we were originally planning because of the way everything shook out with DESE and separate school and piece. And, I was concerned we were going to have to use appropriation funds in that FY26 year, which is going to be a hard year to begin with. And that's where, that's another piece. And I know I'm speaking in code, it's not really clear to the public, but, ARPA funds were given to us to support the transition of 6th grade. And there's some real costs, and there's energy costs, right? There's some other costs that aren't just about people, PD, and I just got concerned that we were going to exhaust that at the year that's probably going to be the hardest for us. And so you read that correctly in my statement, and that is what I was referring to.
Are there other questions? So I think we'll get back to come back to it again when we get to future agenda planning, talking about and confirming a meeting on the 24th. But it, judging by either the comments or lack of comments, that we're generally okay with that approach. So okay. So since we've already mentioned this several times, a next item is the FY24 initial budget and community engagement plan. And so the community engagement plan really is the following up on our conversation at our last meeting, the idea to do community input or community survey forum, much in the same manner that the regional school committee did for that community. So that modified draft is attached to the agenda item, but we'll start with the budget and then move into the community survey plan. So with that, I'm going to actually, before we dive into the budget, I just want to, I think we updated this at our last meeting, but the budget coordinating group did meet again to talk about that initial guidance, and that was back in December. I can't remember if it was early December, mid-December. It's all a blur at this point, but there was a meeting, and Peter and I are the representatives from the Amherst School Committee on that meeting, and so we raised the question about this notion of equal distribution, essentially, of hitting all departments of the town with equal increases, and that 2.5% increase, that is just everybody gets the same increase for their budgets. And so we pushed a little bit on this notion, and whether in some years that one particular department in schools or the town would need more than that, and if there was appetite to sort of divvy that up so that the schools could have more, knowing that. And I think at that time, the quick back of the envelope that I had done before was about 4% increase, which was already larger than the 2.5% increase. So that conversation did happen. I think there was good and open dialogue at that meeting about how the other arms of the town, if you will, are facing the same inflation that we're facing, have many of the same constraints and challenges that we face. And so there wasn't a notion to adjust the guidance. And in the end, my understanding is the town council did vote on that final guidance that we received at the financial indicators meeting. So sorry for that long-winded, but with that, I will turn it over to Doug to walk us through the initial draft.
realizing I was both muted and trying to share my screen simultaneously. So I was asking my computer to do too many things all at once, or maybe myself too many things all at once. I'm hoping that hopefully this is large enough for everyone to see. If not, I can certainly zoom in a little bit more. I may try to, let me see if I can make it a little bit bigger because there's a fair amount of, that may be a bit too much. That's probably going to be a little easier to read. You don't need headers as much as you need some of the other things that are on this chart. And so, this is, I think the key word I'll stress tonight a little bit is initial. There's a lot of unknowns this year for a lot of different reasons. With a new governor's budget, which normally could be coming out in a couple of weeks, will not be out until the beginning of March. Of course, that is usually the month in which the House of Representatives, about the middle of that month, put out their budget, and then the Senate comes along a month later, and so those will all be pushed back a little bit, I'm sure, as a result, or a bit more of a scramble. So it's a little bit of an unknown exactly how the new governor will apportion the state budget, and things like Chapter 70 impact that. So the town's taking a cautious approach relative to what it thinks its revenues are going to look like, and we have as well. But that's part and parcel of why the town's recommendation to us as a department of the town is a 2.5% increase, and so you can see that number sort of toward the bottom here. That's about a 2.5% increase over last year's, or the current year, I should say, appropriation for the town. And so I'll walk through the few pieces that we know here, the unknowns that we know, some of the assumptions we're making. One of the big things that's still an open-ended question is our contracts for 4 of our 6 unions are still open at the moment. We're still in negotiations. Made estimates as best I can as to what we think are going to happen relative to those negotiations, the financial impact of those, and at the same time trying to understand and work within the sort of possibilities of our budget as well at the same time. And so those negotiations will still play out, and hopefully we'll get them resolved in fairly short order, but we'll still see. But that's an open-ended question. So we've made estimates about what we think that's going to cost us in the coming year. Needless to say, some of the other more routine things that we do, we use school choice. We're using $700,000 in this proposed budget, or this initial budget. We took in a little less school choice revenue than that last year, but nonetheless, our balance is in good shape. Over the couple of preceding years, we've used a little less school choice. We built our balance up, so we have the ability to sort of tolerate a little higher level of use, and that was by design. We sort of stockpiled a little school choice money, so we had it available to us over these next couple of years because we knew some things were coming that were going to be hard financially. But $700,000 is a reasonable choice there, and will help reduce our overall expenses that we charge to appropriations. We had a very fortunate circumstance in some respects with special education costs. You'll notice that drops rather significantly. And what's happening here is some of our more expensive placements are shifting out of our district for next year. And so as a result, that lowers our costs. Coupled with that is that circuit breaker, which is a mechanism of funding that the state has for extraordinarily expensive special education costs. We earn it in one year, we receive it in the following year, and then we spend it in the year after that. It's not something we can carry over like we do school choice. And so we have a fairly hefty, I believe I have $488,000 in circuit breaker funding that we received during the year last year that we'll be using, or we'll be receiving, I'm sorry, this year. We're in process with that at the moment, but we will use it next year, and it is required for us to use it next year. That's a real help to our budget. It also makes our special education costs look absurdly low as a result of that. But the reality is it's a real benefit for us, and it's covering some costs that have also decreased. So it's a significant change in our budget for the positive. We still get and are continuing to receive some support through a strategic partnership agreement with the university. We generally leverage that $170,000 to reduce some of our ELL teacher expenses, and so that's reflected in here. Those things, both the school choice and that UMass support money, reduce the numbers that are in the salary lines up at the top, the very first line at the top. Those are both sort of subtracted out of that, before you see the number on the page there. Here's where we get into the much more expensive aspects of the coming year, and that is right now we're estimating an 8% increase in our health insurance costs. And so what you see in the risk and benefits section is an almost 10% increase overall, and part of that's the artifact of the sort of inflationary factor of 8%. That also has to do with shifts in our enrollment of staff and in our insurance program. Other insurance costs that we have, they're going up, property insurance, et cetera, et cetera. So all of those are contributing to that pretty strong increase in risk and benefits. We don't have any salaries for the sixth grade transition. So thinking about kind of moving ahead with our sixth grade in there, it's not really any additional salaries in this budget associated with that. So, if we were anticipating some adds relative to some needs around, say, administrative needs or otherwise, they are not reflected here. We don't really have those in here. But we do have, as I was mentioning before, from the standpoint of our inflationary pressures, transportation, we have a particular arrangement in our contract that tracks the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, for the New England area, and we use that. We average it for the course of the previous year, and we use that to project our transportation for the coming year. And so we have a pretty strong increase in our transportation costs as a result of inflation that we've experienced over the last 12 months. So just to give you an example, for fiscal 23, when we were projecting from last year at this time, it was about a 4.5% increase. This year, it's going to be probably more like 7.5%. We're waiting one last reporting period, which is December of 2022, before we do the full projection of that. But it's definitely a pretty strong push on our budgets. And so as a result of all of that, all of those different inflationary things, estimates for contracts that aren't yet settled, and all of that, our shortfalls in the $800,000 range at this point in time. Are there things that we're going to do and can do to reduce this over the next few weeks and as we proceed through the budget process? Absolutely. So again, we'll try to mitigate those things as best we can with just better estimates, for one thing, and then additionally other refinements and understanding of both what our costs are going to be, what our expenses might turn out to be, and then also whatever other efficiencies we can realize relative to how we move forward here. So it is not the most cheery of pictures here, but I would stress that it's an initial budget. We're trying to get a sense of where we sit and what kinds of impacts we're seeing from the inflation on our non-staff expenses, as well as those on our staff expenses. So I think at this point I'll stop and see if people have questions, and see if I can help answer anything anyone has.
I have an initial question, because you answered it, but I just want to sort of say it again. This is not actually the expenses related to running level services next year. This is how much is going to be, how much we need from general appropriations from the town, correct? Because you said we're using school choice and UMass support, and circuit breaker,
right,
all of which we still have those costs. It's just being
right,
funded from a different wallet, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, because I think what I would like us to see, so that we can have the conversation with the community, because you said it, our special ed costs are not going down by 400,000.
No.
It's because we have this enormous circuit breaker coming in that we have to spend in this particular budget year. So what that sets it up is, then the next year, if the circuit breaker isn't as big and the costs don't really change, then it's going to look like we have this enormous increase in special ed when we really don't.
Right.
And so I think like this is a perfect example in my mind of sort of how it gets really confusing for people to understand what does it cost for us to run our schools. So I think when we come back in the future and the next time, I think it's showing that, like, here's what it costs. Now I've applied the circuit breaker. I've applied the school choice. And so this is then what we need to look for other, either the town of Amherst or ESSER funds to support the rest of this, or this is the cuts we need to make.
Right, and that's, I agree that that's the difficulty of a sort of an abbreviated single page snapshot of the budgets. This is truly the expense to be covered by appropriated resources. And so those other resources that we have, title grants, ESSER grants, ARPA funds, perhaps from the town, any of the circuit breaker from the state, et cetera, are not shown here, and in some ways, like you say, sort of dampen the true totality of expense that we're incurring to educate our kids. And so that's part and parcel of when we do the bigger budget book, which will be coming soon, where we sort of lay out, we try to have sections that encompass those other aspects of it. And I think it's always a struggle about how to get a level of detail and clarity around those other sources, and how they support the totality of what we spend, in total to educate the kids and provide all the things they need. So certainly I take that advice, and I'll be sure to try to make sure to clarify that and point those things out as we move ahead.
Right. And then one other, you talked about, oh, now I can't find it. Nah, I can't remember. It'll come back to me. We'll go to Irv raised his hand, and then Jennifer, and then hopefully by then I'll have remembered my other clarifying question. Irv.
All right, two things. I did notice, Doug, that you did include in here the town budget, projected town budget figure that we think the schools that would be receiving. You did put that in there. That's where you came up, how you came up with the deficit. But one of the questions I have is, and I should know this answer, but I don't, is when I look at the 117% increase in control accounts, the question comes to my mind: what are the components of those control accounts?
Right. So in most years, the control accounts are pretty modest things, like we have some obligations around sabbatical leave and we plan for maternity leaves, that sort of thing. What that holds in a year like this, where we have unsettled contracts, is some of the estimates of what those settled contracts are going to cost are held in that. And so that's part of why it's so large, is that's kind of a container of our estimate, among other things. But the primary part of that is our estimates of what some of those contract, the resolution of those contracts is going to cost, and then those costs will be distributed up in the upper portion of our salaries, the upper portion of this form. So the big number in there is some estimates on what we think those contracts are going to settle for, and what they're going to ultimately cost as far as the totality of our expenses.
Thank you,
Jennifer.
Thanks. I'm going back to what Allison said and agreeing what Allison said about the fact that this data is confusing. And I feel like I've asked this question before, and it's similar to what Allison said. Like, for example, the 17.7 million in salaries for FY24 projected is actually, like, that's not actually what we're spending on salaries. It's actually 700,000 higher than that, because we're applying school choice to that line, or roughly. And so I agree. It's really super confusing. And also what Allison had said about special education, like, in my experience working with other not-for-profit organizations, when we look at budgets and financial reports or financial projections like this, there's a revenue section. There's like a revenue section on top with a series of rows of different types of revenue, like school choice and circuit breaker, et cetera, for each year, for each column. And then below that is total expenses without the revenue applied and subtracted out, so that we have a full picture. I mean, I realize we do need this information because we need to be able to to see what needs to be appropriated from the town. But if we could see a full picture of here's our revenue, here are our expenses, and this is our deficit, revenue minus expenses, that would be really helpful for me as well as for the public. And as Allison said, for us to be able to talk to the public about what it costs to run our schools. Because Doug, you had said that this document is actually, you said expenses to be covered by appropriated resources, but it's titled level services budget. So it's confusing as to what it actually represents. And if we could see a full picture of revenue and expenses, I think that would go a long way to clearing up the confusion and making it easier for us to talk to members of the public about, as Allison said, what it really costs to run our schools.
Right, and I think that's, I mean, part of the reason why this is presented the way it is, and not to push back too much, but at the same time, this is a first glimpse of what's happening relative to the appropriated part of our budget, which is where we deal directly with the town council and its ability to appropriate funds. The fuller picture of the rest of the budget will be coming soon, and it is an evolving picture because we have a number of different sources that fund and are part and parcel of this. So we have a number of revolving funds that include our food service. We have a number of title grants. We have and a number of salaries covered by that. As a matter of fact, in just on this page alone, there's the 170,000 from UMass support and the 700,000. So that's 870,000 that's covering expense, salary expenses that are not reflected here. The thing is year over year, those numbers oftentimes don't change a lot, and so their impact on this appropriated part of the budget is sort of the same each time. That being said, I fully agree with you that the totality of what we spend on education and what our expected revenue sources are is the fuller picture, and certainly that's part and parcel of what will be coming as we get into a little more detail of the budget in the coming weeks.
I remembered. I think that the just building on that again, and then I also remembered my other clarifying question. But I think in order to arrive at this, there's some base understanding of the totality of what you're estimating salaries to be for the salary expenses in total. You might not know how much you're going to exactly how much you're going to have to allocate, use from title or from other funding sources, but you have there's behind that is an idea of sort of what those the total cost of salaries, the total cost of regular ed or special ed, and what you're talking about that's challenging because there's uncertainty and the clarity on the funding sources happens over time and not all at the same time. So you might get this one, this one 95%, but this one you still only have a very 50% confidence in that, right? And that's the challenge, is the funding sources and coming back to how much is going to be the appropriated for the town of Amherst. But we have an idea already of what the costs are, because that's kind of a little bit behind this. So it seems like the question isn't how much is it going to cost us, but the question is how much are we going to be able to rely on the different revenue sources? How much is left over and what's that gap between that and what the town of Amherst is able to fund the schools, right? So it seems like it could be done at a less detailed level, maybe. I don't know. It's something to think about for the next time we look at our next meeting when we look at this budget. But my question that I had, which is a clarifying, I think in past years, sometimes when we show like the reductions to get that 800,000, sometimes some of that is attrition or normal things that would happen. Are those already included in this before that 800,000, or because those wouldn't really be level services if we know that our costs are going to get down because we have fewer students in this particular one? But it sounds like that's already baked into here.
I would suggest there's a little bit of that in there. So for example, I mean, a really simple one is, for example, if we know someone's retiring, they're a master's 45, step 15, right? We know what that cost is, but the replacement for that person is likely going to be less. There's some of that we have factored into this. There are some other aspects regarding that kind of thing that we haven't as fully explored at the moment. I mean, I think we're still in process on that, which will also be some realization. The other thing I think I'll point out is when we talk about projected ad reduction, when the reductions are actually also if there are other revenue sources that become available. So if there's some new grant that comes along that we didn't anticipate, we can certainly do that, and that would be helpful if it's not already targeted. I think one of the other things I'll say just around a lot of those other resources that we have available is they're often specifically limited. They have to be used for a particular purpose and from year to year. And so again, when you talk about, oh, how much are we, when we're making conversations about what we're going to add or remove from particularly our programming, it's really driven by what's on the screen now. In other words, what's in our appropriated budget. Those others that are funded via grants have a lot less wiggle as far as their sort of impact. So things like circuit breaker or school choice or a strategic partnership agreement, we have more latitude on how we leverage those. So I think that's part of why we include those in the conversation here. I think when we look at the other things that are helping fund other parts of our budget, they're prescriptive in what you can use them for by and large, and so they have a less profound effect when you talk about what are we going to sort of add or remove from our level of services. That's not to say we shouldn't show them and demonstrate that to everyone and make that more clear and plain to folks. But I think and like I said, I think when we get past this sort of initial phase, this is just to give you a sort of a frame of reference that we're talking about. And as we get into understanding much more about the details of some of those particular expenses, like our insurance, we'll know by the first week in the last week of January or the first week in February, we get the formal number there. If that's 7% versus 8%, that's a pretty that's hundreds of thousands of dollars across the three districts, but particularly here, those are pretty big impacts on our budget. So we'll get into those details and we'll refine those. And I think again, as we get to that place, we'll also paint the totality of the budget in a much larger book in a much more profound way to articulate those other kinds of sources and their use.
Thank you, Peter.
So real quick, I'll just plus one to what Allison and Jennifer and then Allison again were talking about with being able to do it at the totality for the reasons mentioned. Although I'll also say this is what I expected for January 10th. I mean, we didn't set an explicit expectation for you about that we want to see something fundamentally different than what you have always shown us. And so I would say, we have some time. Like you said, there's it's an extended budget process here in terms of finalization because of the new turnover in governor. So I would say any school committee member that has like some ideas of of a simple high level overview of what you'd like to see in terms of structure, I would say, send your feedback to Doug and make some suggestions about, and maybe that's something that's achievable in the big budget book, which I also want to acknowledge is an immense undertaking, and Doug doesn't have 900 hours in the week, and so I'm sure he'll do his best. But yeah, I agree with that general principle because it helps the public understand, how much are we spending on special education, how much is it going. Right. But the main comment I want to make is, I don't think we should bury the lead here in the conversation. We're $800K in the hole for next year if nothing changes. That's going to be a profound negative impact to staff and services for the Amherst Elementary Public Schools, based on the guidance that the town council voted recently, and it's 2.5%. So if the 2.5% town council appropriation stays, and we don't get any significant increase in one-time money, either from our own use of ESSER money, which is not infinite, or from TOA ARPA, or some of the other variables don't fundamentally change drastically, this is going to be a significant budget cut. And so the thing that I would like our committee to just ponder, obviously you don't have to figure this out tonight, but I think it should really be informing our thinking for the next few months, is how do we help close this, right? How do we help advocate to close this? And where is our biggest bang for our advocacy buck? Like Allison talked about earlier, we went to the budget coordinating group. We talked about the pain that this is going to cause and the situation that we're under. But we understand that the town council also doesn't have an infinite appropriations budget, and the other departments are dealing with that. So there's limitations to that avenue. There's potential opportunity on the state for new values in a budget with the changeover of governorship. I just saw recently MASC and some other organizations are advocating for even higher percent level of circuit breaker reimbursement, which is nice. But there's also going to be a mad scramble for the rest of that education money as well, the Student Opportunity Act is going to take a lot of air out of the school revenue budget. So maybe there's some limitations to our state level advocacy, and so this really sort of, I think, double heightens the level of urgency that we need to sort of be like thinking about all opportunities. And so I think it's rather prescient and appropriate that and I appreciate the rapidity with which the superintendent and finance director brought forth the potential pause on the sixth grade move. That if there is positive budget ramifications to pausing on that, that's something that we have to look at really soon. So I wanted to just say that overall theme before we get too down into the minutia of how we want these spreadsheets to look. So I guess my last question, Doug, is I don't totally understand the relationship between the control accounts line and the salaries line. So that 325, 569, that 951, 570. Like if you combine that, that's like a 7.6% increase over the FY23 budget for salaries. So are we projecting that based on how we think negotiations are going to go, that our salaries are going to increase by more than 7.5%? Because I think if that's somewhat a qualified yes, I think that would be really helpful for the public and frankly our staff to understand that, look, this is the budget that we were able to put together based on the town council appropriation. We're 800,000 in the hole. It's not a matter of, can you drag the school committee back to face-to-face negotiations, right? It's like there are real limitations here. And this is a significant reduction based on what the town council is appropriating, has recommended for guidance.
So I think there's a couple things I'll say about that. And one is that the salary line that you're seeing in fiscal 23, because again, it was an unsettled year. So that is in some senses artificially low in the salary line. So that 951 is sort of over, of the difference between fiscal 23 and fiscal 24 is a little larger than it normally would be. In a typical year, it won't be 5.7%. It'll be much closer to 3.5 or 4. And then that's also, I think, part and parcel of what you're seeing down in the control accounts a little less so, but the base salary, it's an artifact of what I put in 23 is what we literally budgeted, and so there's a bit of in some ways a bit of an overstatement of sorts in that top line relative to the change. The other thing I will say, just a broad general comment, you'll notice at the sort of, on the bottom line there under total expenses, and you'll see a percentage that's 5.7%. That's sort of right next to the 1,433,000. That percentage change, that's an overall change to the budget, just sort of 23 to 2024. In my professional organization around the state, someone was looking at their budget and said, "Oh my goodness, what the heck's happening here?" And sort of posed the question out to the group and said, "What's it look like?" And so probably about 25 or 30 districts at least have kind of replied. This is not an atypical kind of number that people are looking at as far as their initial budgets are concerned. And I think people are being cautious about what their Chapter 70 is going to look like. Both regional and other districts, are weighing in. They know what their town finances are like. They know what their circumstance. So this 5.7 as a general sort of rule of thumb is not wildly different than some other folks. Some people have much higher numbers than that. Some people have somewhat more modest numbers, but we're not wildly different than a lot of other districts that have kind of responded to that. So I think there's a general inflationary pressure on everybody that's driving some of this in our budget as well as in budgets around the state. And so I think all the districts are going to be in the mindset we are over the next few weeks and months as we try to figure out how to continue to do what we do and what resources we have available to do that.
I think the way that just pointing out also that the FY23 budget has a control account that's quite large relative to prior years, and that's sort of where some of that estimate or sort of, risk allowance basically for where the 4 contracts might end up is in that line. And so I think the, to go back to Peter's comment about, 800,000 is significant. And given the history of cuts that we've had to make over the years, it's not necessarily like we have a lot of fluff, right? We don't. We talk about that a lot. We've talked about that with the town council. There isn't fluff in this, and we're talking about ways. We're going to be meeting in 2 weeks to talk about ways to make sure there isn't even more inefficient. That we're not introducing inefficiencies for something, budget inefficiencies, I want to say. But I want to also, which gets back at my question about how much is already baked in here in terms, we've seen in the past, like, oh, this is enrollment driven, so we can take this cut, we can cut, we don't need this, so this isn't an enrollment driven reduction that we then in past years have applied to that, that, like in this case, $800,000 that we need to go. So what I'm hearing you say is that there isn't a ton of that the changes that will be happening that might reduce that 800,000 have more to do with some of the uncertainties and the other revenue sources, that the big motions, there's a little bit more clarity, but really the hugest uncertainties in here are the 4 contracts, because you add up the, the whatever 19, 20 million in terms of payroll accounts, plus add in the 600,000 or some portion of the 600,000 from the control account, and that's our payroll. That's where we have the biggest uncertainty in this budget. And then you said the revenue. So I guess it's all to say that when we look to making cuts, are we talking about making cuts to our estimates and flexibility in terms of settling those contracts? Or are we making cuts to, like, direct student services in order to be able to leave that flexibility in there? And maybe that's too early to ask that question. I don't know.
Yeah, let me answer part of it, if that's okay. So I do think, and I think at our next budget meeting where we have the budget book and we're going into detail, I think we can try to spill this out a little bit more. So I think it's not as cut and dry of what's an enrollment driven reduction versus a budget cut, because every time we reduce a class in this district, so I'll say, well, the class is now at 21. If we didn't do that, the class would be at 15. We think that's the right size. And there's legitimacy to that, like that experience. And so the same thing could be true. I'm not going to reference budget cuts in the past, but I think a lot of times we've made them, we could, I think, justify them based on enrollment reductions or enrollment adjustments. But that's not how they're perceived by the wider public, because I think our staff do a fabulous job of, if there's fewer kids in a space, they find other things that are wonderful for kids to do, right? Like, it's not like anyone's, not having anything to do. They're all filling their time incredibly well. So I think that's where I have a hard time distinguishing between that. And so what I want to say in terms of 804,000 right now, we've not made some enrollment driven reductions that we're absolutely going to have to make. I think that was referenced in my earlier presentation about class size. That's not reflected here because it's not as clean as perhaps it is in other communities. There's some like obvious ones. Paraeducators work with an individual student. That individual student goes to the middle school. They're no longer part of the Amherst Public Schools. Those things are really clean. What my experience is that every other reduction that we make based on enrollment has a conversation to it. And so, that's for our next meeting, and our meeting in February, where we go dig deeper into the larger budget, is to make some judgment calls around that issue. Because there's implications with what we do. But I think the bottom line for me is that, going back to Peter's point, is that this is not good news. wherever this budget lands, maybe it'll get a little better, right? We're not so affected by Chapter 70 because that goes to the town, not to the district, and it goes to municipality, not directly to the school district in this district. So things could get a bit better, but they're not great. And I think the projection moving forward multiple years is continued to be not great. And I think, we're going to try to be really thoughtful about what we can do this year, but also looking ahead as best we can to what are cuts and how do we become more sustainable, and how do we get to 2020 fiscal year 27, where we know that, assuming the building project goes through, we have a system change that'll make us more sustainable as well. So hopefully it's not everything that you asked for, Allison, but I think it tries to get at some of the key concepts that you were talking about.
Thank you. Yeah. Are there other questions? Then we can move on to the budget input form. Would folks like me to share my screen to see it on? Okay, just give me a sec. It's not showing up. Oh, there it is. Sorry. Okay. So as mentioned, we talked about at our last meeting that because the regional school committee, because we saw that how much rich information, just qualitative information that the regional school committee had received from that budget input survey, that we were interested in doing something similar for the elementary schools. So this literally, I took the survey that the region had done and just made edits, frankly, just to change for the elementary schools. So it should be in the same order, same questions. I think there was one area that there was a multiple choice. I didn't import them into this Word doc, but it was the question about where do you get your information about the budget. So just to walk through sort of, what's your role? So no change here other than changing region to Amherst Elementary. Again, change the name of the schools. So we have 3 schools. And then in the satisfaction question, changing the names of the schools, changing from regional school committee to Amherst School Committee. Then we had the 2 open-ended questions on what do you value about our elementary schools? What do you believe our elementary schools could do better at? Familiarity with our elementary schools budget and financial situation. So this is the question, the multiple choice question. The choices would be identical to what the regional school committee had used about where they get their information about the school's budget. What area would they like more information about? What motivates them to participate in the elementary school budget? And then the series of questions about the ranking about importance of the different priorities within the district. I will say, I think the edits that I made here was I removed electives, or there's a question about broad elective choices. I tweaked this one, and I would love thoughts from you all about, is there in your mind a better way of even phrasing this? I struggled a little bit with this one, so I focused. The regional school committee was high levels of achievement, preparing students for college or life beyond high school, or graduating students who are prepared for college or life beyond high school. So this one I said high levels of achievement, preparing students for middle school and high school achievement. So would love ideas on strengthening that one. And then the series, the ratings on satisfactory or quality on instructional programs, instructional materials, support services, and facilities and ground. And I think this one, the tweak I made in this was changing that to outdoor play space from outdoor athletic facilities. I think I removed just general athletic facilities. And then the other change that I made was, I think, removing some of the tweaking this to better match and align with the instructional program in our elementary schools. Thoughts? Peter.
Yeah, my thought is that it's 9:20. I think that probably explains our level of commentary right now. I think this is overall, good. The high level of achievement line. I mean, maybe it's something about high quality of academic instruction. You could say high level academic instruction, but then that's sort of narrowing it to academic high achievers as opposed to students, doing what's right for them. There's a lot that could be said in that line, but maybe something with the word academic quality of academic instruction. I think in terms of practical implementation, we have a few moderate sized challenges that maybe the region didn't have. One is that we're starting this now, and the region, obviously started it a little while ago. So we're a fair bit into our budget process, obviously, with tonight. I think the second is that we have such a significant budget deficit projected. And so there's a whole lot in here that's much more than just what do you want us to fund, right? But it's we wouldn't want to give people the impression of like, tell us everything that you want in our schools, and then our response is that we're cutting this. Obviously, that's going to inform like how we make those cuts. Should we have to make them? And then I think the other thing too is that if the community is going to engage on one elementary school thing this spring, it's going to be the building project, I think. Or rather, I should say, if something's going to capture someone's attention that doesn't normally pay attention or engage with the schools, it's going to be the building project. And so it's just kind of an open question. I mean, I would still support going forward with this, but I just kind of an open question of is it asking for too much attention and engagement? I mean, it is only a survey, and people can fill it out or not if they want. They're not like bound to if they receive the invitation. So I guess I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth on this, but I just did want I wanted to raise that kind of concern. It's not as a simple environment that we would be sort of distributing this into.
Irv.
I really wish that I had given more thought to this when I started to review it, so that I could offer more of helpful comments. And I do plan on going back through it again. But I do applaud the idea of doing this. And even though it may be we're already into our budget season, the feedback still could be very helpful to us. So, I intend to go through this, and I will get back to you, Allison, on it.
Great. I sort of, given the hour, I'm going to suggest actually that invite each of you to do that, since we are going to be talking again in 2 weeks. I think, if folks can, have any comments or edits to send to just me, and we can move forward with that and just take one last look at it when we're together in 2 weeks. What I think, I share the thought in terms of the timing, because it would have been ideal to do this earlier than now, though we would have had to have done it in a couple months ago because of the end of the year issues, right? So, but I think because we're facing this deficit, and because we're talking about some other major changes, in my mind, is all the more reason for us to try to get as much input and feedback as we can possibly get as we go through this. And so even if we hit send on a survey, on January 26th, and get it back before before the February meeting, that's still well before a budget hearing, which would be the next, the typical opportunity for the community to weigh in on the budget. So I'm gonna just stop. I would love, if everybody, if anybody has ideas or input, to share that with me, if you can, this week, so that when we're together, we can have something that we can sort of look at this one last time before hitting send. If there's no more, capital, sorry.
So if you'd like, I don't know that it would be helpful necessarily to share the list of projects that we propose to the town, just because it's fairly wordy and it's, there's not a lot of contrast there that you can kind of see or glean much from. But mostly there are sort of the kind of projects you would expect. It's about maintaining the two older buildings, Wildwood and Fort River, that we have. Kind of keeping them safe and functional in the intervening years until a new school becomes available for us and brings it online. A little bit more of investment in Crocker Farm, because it's a building we're going to stay in for quite a little while. I think the really big question mark, we have a lot less technology. Right now we're in a sweet spot with some replacement of Chromebooks and that sort of thing, so that the technology asks for the coming year are very modest, actually, which is helpful to Amherst, so that a year or two from now, when we're going to ask for a bunch of Chromebooks, they'll be prepared, hopefully, because we'll have had a little bit of a dip in that request. I think the big one is really there's a item listed at $450,000 for the electric school bus, and then right below that is electric charging that goes with it. The grant that we got is for sort of both pieces of that. So the grant amount was just under $200,000. And that grant really applies to both the bus and the charging station. I mean, in what I wrote to you guys in regard to that, I think I took the entirety of it off of the bus price. So that gets the bus down to $255,000. But it's going to take about $120,000, we think, to sort of put a fast charging station in. That's one of the things we've experienced with our current electric bus, is that we don't have that level or that ability to fast charge. So it limits our ability to use it in certain circumstances. So if we run it in the morning and then we plug it in right when we get back, then we can run it in the afternoon. But you can't run any intermediate things in between, like a lunchtime. So when you have an early release day or something like that, it gets to be problematic to use that. If you have a fast charging station, then you have the ability to charge the bus in a couple hours, and so you finish the morning bus run. If you have a midday need, whether it be a field trip or a early release day or something like that, with the fast charging, you have more flexibility to leverage that electric bus for that purpose. So that's one of the, besides the general sort of requirement of the grant to do it, it also makes sense just operationally to have that fast charging station. So those are, but again, it's a pretty big price tag. And so, the superintendent, I think, had an opportunity to speak today with the town manager and the finance director at the town. I know that, that's a big ask. Is that the highest leverage for sort of, sustainability, initiatives, that kind of thing. I think they're thinking about that in context of the larger capital plan and the other kind of sustainability projects that they have. I think we weren't, as Mike noted earlier, we were pleasantly surprised to have been awarded the grant, because I think things weren't necessarily sort of lining up in our favor to get it, but nonetheless, we were fortunate to get that, so we're happy to have the opportunity. So I think it's a matter of can we work with the town to find the right resources or dedicate the right resources to sort of move in that direction. And I don't know if Mike has any other sort of comments or suggestions relative to that and what he's had in conversation with the finance director of the town or the manager there.
Yeah, I think it's new information to them, as well, and they want to bring it up to Stephanie, their sustainability coordinator, and the folks at the town who are working on this. And there's funds from the town that are attached to sustainability initiatives, and have other folks weigh in on the relative merits of this approach and these funds going here versus other places. So I think all that to say is, I think rightfully the town is engaged and has structures for folks who are really deeply engaged in sustainability efforts to make sure that the dollars that the town is spending are yielding the best results in terms of climate reduction or carbon reduction. And so I think they'll go through those channels, and it'd be great if it works out. And I advocate for it. I think it's a lot of money in terms of the double ask, right? The ask for the new bus plus the significant ask for repairing the old bus, and we'll see.
The question that I had regarding the bus, it didn't even occur to me until I was looking at the charger, because the charger is on regional school property. Is that correct? So I guess, and then it just begs the question, because the buses are shared across the districts as well. So I guess the question is my question is, how is this an Amherst expense and capital investment as opposed to a region?
So in our busing arrangement, which we have a somewhat complex arrangement because we own some of our own vehicles, we contract with a third party for some of the transportation costs as well. And so Amherst owns all of the buses and has for many years. So that's not atypical to have that be part of the capital ask for the Amherst, for the town of Amherst. And it is part and parcel of how we sort of structure our costs and our year-over-year operating costs as well, that's factored in and appropriately accounted for in that regard. And they're leveraged a bit more in running the Amherst routes. And so the sort of balance is there, I guess, is the simple way to say it. The other thing I'll say is that we're in, as far as the cycle of replacement, this is a year to replace a bus. So even if we don't, if for some reason the going with an electric bus isn't possible for whatever reason, we will still need to ask for the replacement bus cost kind of regardless. So that'll be a pretty significant ask. It's those buses currently they've gone up in price like everything else. Probably in that $125,000 range would be my estimate right off the top of my head. I'd have to double check with Mr. Roy Clark a little bit to confirm that. But just to paint that picture, it's like whether we do electric or not, we're going to need a bus, just because there's limitations on how long you can have them and how many years you can have them and how many miles you can have on them. So those are both factors to our cycle of replacement.
I guess then the related to that is the question about the charger, because then that's an Amherst investment on a regional property.
Right. So we'd have to work out an arrangement with the town as far as how that works, and it's like many things we do where sort of cooperative arrangements will need to be made relative to that, and access and ownership and maintenance and all of those kinds of things are all part and parcel of that conversation. It's a little easier when the bus is owned. We can just, the regional schools go, yeah, you can park your bus here. That's fine. That's a pretty simple one. But when you start talking about sort of material things and investment in infrastructure, it gets a little trickier. There are some other vehicles we have that the region owns that in coming years will be, and they're smaller obviously, but in coming years that we'll want to have that ability to have electric vehicles. And so some of this infrastructure costs that are associated with this will be helpful and cooperative to those transitions as well. That's a little longer down the line, but yeah, I think we work out with the town an appropriate sort of agreement lease, one of those sort of 100-year leases for $1 kind of thing. Not exactly that. I'm being a little flippant here, but an arrangement of that sort that formalizes that agreement between the town and the regional schools would probably be necessary in that. But I don't see that as a huge burden. I think it's just a matter of the formality of making the right arrangements.
Thank you. Peter.
So real quick on the electric bus thing, I think what would help for like the JCPC discussion / presentation would be, to the degree that you're able to provide a cost comparison of a traditional school bus versus the electric school bus, given that that really is the decision, given that it's a bus purchase year. Maybe that's something that the sustainability folks in town are more able to do or not. And I know it's complicated because you have to project the cost of electricity and fuel and maintenance and whatnot and savings. But I think that would be, and obviously this qualitative benefit as well. But I think that would be, in terms of them making a decision about where they want to put their investment, that would really help. The capital, I have a number of other questions on the capital, but I'll leave them for another night. The one thing I did want to ask about though was the back playground at Crocker Farm. So the one that's mostly used by kindergarten or first grade, that's in really not good shape, is the only playground that's available for kids of a certain age. Need to address that soon. Could you give us an update on what happened with that CPA request, and then what the thinking is for the long-term capital plan and how we incorporate that in? I just don't want it to drop off the radar of any kind of medium to long-term capital plan discussions we have either here or JCPC.
Right. So in regard to that sort of, it's called the kindergarten playground, but it's really probably kindergarten grade 1, 2, even to some extent. That sits sort of what I would call behind the school, as opposed to sort of on the end of the parking lot, which is where the upper grades tend to play. So we got CPA funding to help with the design of that space and sort of or redesign of that space, and so we are in process with trying to get our work together to do that work. And so when CPA was evaluated, we did put in for the sort of construction costs for the coming year. In regard to that, in conversation with the CPA and what other projects they have on their queue and that sort of thing, they said, well, if we were pushing that back a year, would that be possible? And I think we, in consultation with the facilities director, we said yes. We would probably just think about the sort of capacity for us to kind of go through the design process and then subsequently also do a construction work there. We didn't feel like that it would be, while it would be nice to get the funding at the beginning of fiscal 24 to do that project, the reality of sort of actually implementing that seemed a little less likely. And the CPA, I think, had some other projects that they had perhaps more urgency or were more perfectly queued up to be executed right away. So I think that was, that puts us, we'll reapply next fall for the cycle for the fiscal 25. So that's the expectation there. I think for us is to try to get that done in that time frame and be really queued up so that we can execute on that right at the beginning of fiscal 25 in the summer of 24 would be my hope, and I think the facilities director as well. So I think that's sort of the trajectory timeline wise on that. It would be nice to fix it sooner, and there are lots of needs there, but I think the reality of both the funding structure and our capacity to sort of get the work done is going to push us back a little bit on that, I think.
Other questions? Okay. Thank you. Good. So for future agenda planning, our next meeting, as we talked about, we'll meet on the Tuesday, the 24th of January. And one major topic and one really brief topic. Major topic, 6th grade to the middle school. We'll figure the timing and staffing and discussion about both of those options. And then the quick one will be just a brief look one more time at the budget input form. And we can talk about the next agenda at that one, but just as a clarification, our next, our February meeting is on the 14th. So I think at our last meeting, we had suggested that we might want to move that to another date. Mike?
Yeah, I was going to propose the 16th for folks. If that works for folks, just given other commitments I have that week. If it doesn't work, we can look at other dates, but that would work ideally for me. Doug, I should have checked with you. Doug, that look okay?
It'll be fine.
It'll be the budget show, yes. Okay, so we'll plan for the 16th then for that meeting. And I'm going to pull up that one just real quick to see. So we have the another update on the building committee, another look at the budget at that meeting, second quarter update of the current fiscal year, and then also an update as folks, just as a last year, one of the updated the screener for dyslexia. So proposal to have an update on literacy programs overall and the use of the new dyslexia screener. And I think, Mike, as you were describing that, the literacy programs, looking at that in much the same way that we sort of took a step back and looked and evaluated our math program. So this is sort of taking a similar approach with our literacy programs.
Yep. The only hedge I want to make is we may need to come back to more dialogue about sixth grade timeline, in which case we may want to push one of those topics off to March.
Yeah, and I would propose that probably the literacy programs would be the ideal one.
Yeah. So I mean, I might do that as a placeholder. We may get to 2 weeks from now and feel like we don't need to meet anymore on that, but I don't want to not have a place for it and then feel squeezed.
Great. Okay. So we have another opportunity to come back at that February agenda when we meet in 2 weeks. So I'll move on. Warrant report. Oh, somebody attached all of them. Thank you. I don't know if that was Doug or Sasha or Mike, but thank you. I like to read them from my email, so I'm going to do that from there. Is there a transfer in there? Yeah. I, Allison McDonald, authorized by my signature a transfer request in the amount of $1,197.83 for a transfer dated December 14th, 2022. And I dated that, I signed that on December 18th, 2022. I, Allison McDonald, authorized by my signature payables in the amount of $149,213.05 for a warrant dated December 19th, 2022. That includes general fund expenses of $91,438.28, revolving fund expenses of $15,154.96, grant funds expenses of $39,995.99, and other funds of $2,623.82, and I signed that on December 23rd, 2022. I authorized payroll in the amount of $769,330.96, dated December 28th, 2022, and I signed that on December 27th, 2022. I authorized payroll in the amount of $2,311.74, dated October 5th, 2022, and I signed that on January 4th, 2023. I Alice McDonald, authorized by my signature, payables in the amount of $152,871 for a warrant dated January 6, 2023. That includes general fund expenses of $79,543.32, revolving fund expenses of $15,296.12, grant fund expenses of $57,939.28. And I signed that on January 9th, 2023. Oh, that is not a warrant. And finally, I authorized payroll in the amount of $738,527.72 dated January 11th, 2023. And I signed that today, January 10th, 2023. And that, I believe, is all. We do not have any gifts tonight. I don't believe. There's none are attached. So I'm going to move that we adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Finally. Moved by Allison, seconded by Ben, and we'll take a roll call vote. Ben?
And I.
Peter?
Peter, I.
Allison, I. Jennifer?
Jennifer, I.
Irv?
Irv, aye.
And the vote's unanimous. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.